You think you can disable the technique. If it were that easy to escape the technique's clutches, then it wouldn't have been listed as a restricted technique. Once you begin cultivating this secret technique, stopping halfway is not an option. At your current level, if you don't reach the third stage of the spirit refinement technique within 10,000 years, your mind will be unable to contain your enormous spiritual sense, and you'll die from self-detonation. Under those circumstances, your fate will be sealed, even if you possess someone else in advance. The man chuckled coldly. At least I still have 10,000 years to find a solution. Come to think of it, aren't there only 3 stages in total to the spirit refinement technique? Hanley asked. He naturally wasn't just going to blindly believe everything that was being told to him, and he immediately identified something suspicious. The man faltered slightly upon hearing this before suddenly arriving at a realization. Who told you that the spirit refinement technique only has 3 stages? Ah, I see. You must have only obtained the first half of the spirit refinement technique's cultivation method. There are actually 7 stages in total. You've only mastered the first 2 stages, so you still have a long way to go. Thank you for telling me this, but would you happen to have the cultivation method for the second half? Hanley asked. The spirit refinement technique isn't exactly a rare cultivation art in the true immortal realm, but it's definitely not very commonplace either. On top of that, trading and teaching the cultivation art is strictly prohibited, and I'm a patrolling envoy, so unfortunately, I do not have the second half of the secret technique. However, there's no need to be too concerned. As long as you can master the third stage, you'll have around 30,000 to 40,000 more years until you face the same crisis with your spiritual sense. With your aptitude, that should be more than enough time to ascend to the true immortal realm and find a solution there, the man replied in a meaningful voice. You make it sound like a simple task to ascend to the true immortal realm. If that really were the case, there wouldn't be so many fellow Taoists stuck at the grand ascension stage, Hanley said with a wry smile. Haha, you seem to have forgotten that you're speaking to a true immortal. If you receive my assistance, your chances of ascension will increase by at least 20%, the man chuckled in response. Hanley was silent for a moment before replying. I'm sure that I'll indeed have a better chance of ascending with your guidance, but surely you didn't summon me here just to help me, Senior. You're a smart man. Indeed, if you were useless to me, I would have still helped you kill that Stembor queen, but I definitely wouldn't have gone out of my way to teleport you here. I've done this because I want you to help me with something, and in exchange, I'll provide you with the methods to master the third stage of the spirit refinement technique as quickly as possible, as well as to transcend your immortal tribulation. What do you think? The man proposed in a straightforward manner. Hanley wasn't surprised to hear this, and he asked in a calm manner, wouldn't a sacred ancestor like fellow Taoist Bao Hua be more suited to assist you? Why does it have to be me? If any ordinary lower realm grand ascension stage being could be of assistance to me, then I wouldn't have been trapped here for so many years, the man chuckled. So what exactly is it that makes me special? Hanley asked with a solemn expression. I took an interest in you precisely because you've cultivated the spirit refinement technique. Even if there were another lower realm grand ascension stage being that was several times more powerful than you, they still wouldn't be of any help to me, the man explained. Hanley was rather perplexed upon hearing this. You're interested in me because I've cultivated the spirit refinement technique. That's right. I haven't described my situation to you yet, but I'm sure you've arrived at some conclusions based on what you can see here, the man sighed. I'll have to ask you to enlighten me, Senior. Is it the case that the Stembora queen we just killed no longer contained its original soul? Of course, if this concerns some sensitive information, then you don't have to tell me, Hanley inquired in a cautious manner after a brief pause. I'd rather not reminisce about those past events, but it can't hurt to tell you what happened. Back then, the Stembor queen was wreaking havoc on the lower realms, and after this was brought to the attention of the immortal envoys of our true immortal realm, I was sent down with another patrolling envoy to eradicate it together. It's quite difficult for immortals like us to descend into lower realms, but we were able to do so through some special methods. Thus, the man began his recount. It was an extremely rare opportunity, even for a grand ascension stage being to hear the experiences of a true immortal, so Hanley was naturally listening very intently. Right as we were about to kill the Stembor queen, a massive spatial storm suddenly erupted in an extremely untimely fashion, impacting all of the realms, and as a result, we were severely debilitated by the power of realms that we had kept in check using treasures and secret techniques. As a result, the tables were immediately turned, and we were almost devoured by the Stembora Queen. In the end, we had no choice but to use an immortal secret technique to self-detonate and severely wound the Stembora Queen. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D4-5F, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 1D630, letter 1D628. After that, we were no longer able to kill the Stembora Queen, and we could only possess a pair of high-grade devilish beings, then build this massive seal before issuing instructions for this seal to be maintained in the future. Following the spatial storm, we discovered that we had lost all contact with the true immortal realm and were unable to go back using the original method. Thus, we posed as Grand Ascension stage devilish beings and explored some of the more renowned lower realms. During this process, we discovered that spatial storm had affected all realms, causing the power of the boundaries between realms to be increased by close to tenfold, so we were unable to find a way to return to the true immortal realm. Thus, we could only return to this place and set up this small formation that our souls could reside and hibernate in. At the time, we could only hope that some of our good friends in the true immortal realm would think of us and try to descend into this realm to save us. We awakened roughly once every millennium, but we were met with disappointment every time. As time passed, my companion began to fall into despair, and we had a few arguments, following which she suddenly restricted me and sealed my soul within this bowl. A hint of fury crept into the man's voice as he spoke. After that, she took the clear jade lamps that were maintaining our souls and sought out the sealed Stembora Queen. As for what happened after that, I'm sure you could already tell after witnessing that Stembora Queen. If I hadn't had the foresight to save a clear jade lamp for myself, my soul would have already dissipated countless years ago. As for why she did that, I presume she wanted to attain a true extreme body by borrowing the Stembora Queen's body, then attempt to force her way through the power of realms and return to the true immortal realm. Of course, perhaps she had some other intentions as well, but that's beyond my knowledge, the man sighed. So that's why you've been trapped here this entire time. Are you recruiting my assistance to help you break free from this bowl, Senior? Henley asked in a calm manner, even as countless thoughts were racing through his mind. During all these past years, I've already undone the seal in this black sandalwood bowl and regained most of my freedom. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to assist you too just now. What I need you to do is to use your powerful spiritual sense to help me activate a talisman. Once the talisman is activated, it'll be able to send a message to a good friend of mine in the true immortal realm. I'm sure that with our close friendship, he'd definitely do everything in his power to rescue me, the man said in a solemn manner. You have a talisman that can directly contact the true immortal realm. Han Li was quite stunned to hear this. Ordinary talismans naturally wouldn't be capable of this, but this talisman of mine was created by a renowned immortal lord of the true immortal realm, and there are very few of them in existence. On top of that, the average low-grade immortal wouldn't possess sufficient spiritual sense to activate this talisman, which is why I'm turning to you now, fellow Taoist Han, the man said in a resigned voice. So you're saying that with the enhancement from the spirit refinement technique, my spiritual sense will be powerful enough to activate this talisman? Han Li asked with furrowed brows. Your spiritual sense is several times more powerful than other beings of the same cultivation base, but it's still lacking compared to my spiritual sense back when I was in my prime. Only after you master the third stage of the spirit refinement technique will there be a chance for you to achieve this, the man replied. Chapter 2250, Assistance. I have to master the third stage of the spirit refinement technique. That won't be an easy task. Back when I was cultivating the second stage, I had already exhausted all of my resources. It won't be very plausible to expect me to make another breakthrough in a short time, Han Li said with furrowed brows. I witnessed your battle against the Stembora Queen through the formation, and I can see that your physical body is no less powerful than those of profound immortals. So with my guidance, it won't be as difficult as you think to master the third stage of the spirit refinement technique. I've never cultivated this technique before, but as a patrolling envoy, I've detained a few people who have cultivated the technique, and I've learned some secret tips and tricks from them, the man said in a confident manner. Even so, this is still quite a difficult proposition. I'll have to think about whether I want to keep progressing in this secret technique. After all, I don't want to become an automatic public enemy if I ever ascend to the true immortal realm in the future, Han Li said with a wry smile. I understand that you're still a little skeptical about my claims. It's all right, even if you don't continue to cultivate the spirit refinement technique. You'll begin to notice some abnormalities in your mind in 1,000 years at most, and you'll come back to find me then. As for ascending to the true immortal realm, don't you think it's a little too early to be thinking about that? I think it's more practical to think about how you can get yourself out of your current predicament, the man said in an indifferent manner, displaying no intention of forcing Han Li into a decision. Han Li was silent for a long while before finally replying, "Thank you for your understanding, Senior. This is a very important matter that'll impact the rest of my cultivation, so I have to be a little cautious. I'll think things through and get back to you as soon as I can. Before that, I have something I'd like to ask you." The man was unsurprised by Han Li's reply and he asked, "Oh, what else do you want to know?" "I want to know exactly what the true immortal realm is like," Han Li said. It's a little too early for you to be thinking about the true immortal realm, but if you really want to know, I can disclose some details to you prior to your immortal tribulation. For now, I can only tell you that it's a vast place. Only after getting there will you come to understand just how vast the immortal regions are. Even if an immortal were to travel for their entire life, there would be no way for them to completely explore even the most ordinary of immortal regions. As such, even though you've cultivated the spirit refinement technique, it'll be very unlikely for you to encounter patrolling envoys like me unless you go to the major cities of the immortal regions, so you're still quite safe, the man replied. "I'm even more looking forward to ascending to the true immortal realm now," Han Li said with a smile. "The cultivation resources and treasures of the true immortal realm are all far more abundant and superior than those of the lower realms. Otherwise, I wouldn't be plotting so desperately to return there. All right, seeing as you're unwilling to accept my proposal, I won't keep you here any longer. I don't like to owe anyone any favors, so you can have this as compensation for helping me kill the Stembora Queen." As soon as his voice trailed off, a streak of white light flew out of the bowl. And Li quickly swept his spiritual sense toward the object before making a grabbing motion to draw it into his grasp, upon which he discovered that this was a translucent jade shard that was as thin as paper with golden and silver runes etched all over its surface. These runes were none other than beveled silver text and golden seal text. "This is a talisman that I brought with me from the true immortal realm, and it contains a drop of purple yun essence, which is very precious even in the true immortal realm. This should be enough to replenish the essential power that you expended from igniting your essential flame," the man explained. Han Li was ecstatic to sense the immortal spiritual qi that was being given off by the jade shard, which was completely different from normal spiritual qi, and he immediately cupped his fist in a grateful salute. "You can go now. Come back and see me when you decide to continue to cultivate the spirit refinement technique." As soon as the man's voice trailed off, a gray light formation emerged beneath Han Li's feet, and he was teleported out of this space. There's no way you can simply stop cultivating that secret technique. In his current situation, I'll only need to hibernate for a short while before he returns to me, the male voice mused following a brief silence. Immediately thereafter, the entire altar tremored violently, and the 8 surrounding copper pillars also rumbled loudly as a giant formation emerged under the entire stone forest. All of a sudden, the stone forest, copper pillars, and sacrificial altar all abruptly vanished, leaving the entire area completely empty again. A year later, a black-robed young man was seated in meditation on a giant rock, which was situated at the top of a massive mountain, not far away from the edge of the original sealed site. After a long while, the young man suddenly opened his eyes, and there was faint purple light flashing within his pupils. "Why is he here?" the young man murmured to himself as a hint of wariness appeared on his face. Moments later, a streak of azure light approached from afar in a blatant manner, reaching the giant mountain after just a few flashes. "You're a punctual man, fellow Taoist Yuan Yan. You're already here 4 hours prior to the agreed time." The azure light faded to reveal a young man in his 20s, who looked down from above with a faint smile. The young man was none other than Han Li, and the black-robed young man was one of the 3 devilish patriarchs, Yuan Yan. "I don't recall agreeing to meet you here. Where is Bao Hua?" "Wait, don't tell me that she was the one who set this up," Yuan Yan said in a cold voice. "Fellow Taoist Bao Hua should currently be in the Jade Cloud Valley. I came here upon her request to keep you company for a short while, fellow Taoist," Han Li said in a straightforward manner. Yuan Yan's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this, but to Han Li's surprise, he remained quite calm as he said, "The Jade Cloud Valley. That's the place where Liu Jai is temporarily residing to recover from her injuries. So Bao Hua really has decided to reclaim her position as matriarch. In that case, Naipan is most likely facing some obstruction as well. Among all of the grand ascension stage beings of the foreign realms, the only one aside from you that can stall Naipan is most likely that old man Copper Crow. What kind of benefits did Bao Hua grant you to enlist your services? I don't know who is the one currently keeping Naipan occupied, but I'd assume that it's old man Copper Crow as well. As for benefits, I did indeed receive some. Otherwise, I wouldn't be willing to face a devilish patriarch like you, Han Li replied in an unhurried manner. HMPH, I heard that even though several people were involved in killing the Stembora Queen, you were the one who contributed the most. It looks like your powers are at least comparable to the likes of myself after you reach the Grand Ascension stage. However, do you really think you can stop me if I insist on leaving? A cold light appeared in Yuan Yan's eyes as he spoke. I did contribute somewhat to the death of the Stembora Queen, but I certainly wouldn't dare to declare myself as the main contributor. As for whether I'll be able to stop you, why don't you give it a try and find out? Han Li goaded in an indifferent manner. Yuan Yan's expression darkened even further upon hearing this, and a hesitant look appeared in his eyes. After a long while he finally sighed and said, "In any case, it was thanks to Bao Hua that I was able to escape from that seal, so I'll let her do as she pleases just this once. If she can succeed, then I'll acknowledge her as one of the 3 devilish patriarchs again, but if she fails, then I definitely won't give her a second chance." Han Li was naturally quite pleased to hear this, and a smile appeared on his face as he said, "I'm glad you've arrived at such a decision, fellow Taoist. If you don't mind, why don't we take this opportunity to discuss some cultivation insights and experiences?" "That's not a bad idea. I'm also very interested to hear about how you were able to become so much more powerful after making your breakthrough." Yuan Yan agreed after only a brief hesitation. Han Li nodded in response, then pointed a finger downward, and another giant rock on the mountain rose up before falling heavily back down onto the mountain not far away from where Yuan Yan was. After that, Han Li descended from above and settled onto the rock. In the sky above a small island countless kilometers away, old man Copper Crow was hovering expressionlessly in midair. Standing directly across from him was a handsome young man wearing a suit of translucent armor, looking on at old man Copper Crow with cold animosity in his eyes. In a valley that was filled with vibrant green bamboo plants, there was a boundless sea of mist that enshrouded the entire valley. A string of explosions rang out incessantly at the center of the sea of mist, and countless flower petal projections could be seen fluttering within it. Chapter 2251, Returning to the Vast Origin House. I was wondering why you hadn't made any progress after all these years. Turns out you never truly recovered from the injuries you sustained in your battle with me. Now that all 6 of your clones have been slain by me and you're trapped in my profound heavenly spirit domain, there's no way you can get out this predicament. Bao Hua's voice rang out from the area enshrouded within the flower petal projections. However, she received no response aside from the incessant rumbling within the vast expanse of white mist. "You chose to sacrifice your 6 clones rather than flee from here. You must be waiting for Naipan and Yuan Yan, right?" Bao Hua said as a mocking sneer appeared on her face. "So what if I am? After I took over your position as one of the 3 patriarchs, Naipan and Yuan Yan both agreed to ensure my safety to the best of their abilities. Don't forget that I'm one of the 3 patriarchs now. I knew that you would take advantage of this opportunity to take revenge on me, so I've already informed those 2 of what you're planning." A furious female voice finally rang out in response from within the mist. "Naipan and Yuan Yan may have promised to protect you from my revenge, but they'll have to be able to get to you first," Bao Hua said with a smile. "What do you mean that? Are you saying that you've recruited allies as well, who would dare to oppose Yuan Yan and Naipan in our holy realm? Could it be that you recruited those powerful beings from foreign realms? How did you convince them to make enemies of Yuan Yan and Naipan for your sake?" A hint of fear finally crept into Liu Jai's voice. "I did indeed have to pay quite a heavy price to recruit those 2 allies. One of them possesses powers that are about on par with Naipan and Yuan Yan, while the other is most likely even more powerful than them. So you're going to be disappointed if you're waiting for reinforcements," Bao Hua chuckled. Liu Jai quickly calmed down, then said in a skeptical manner, "HMPH, one of them has to be old man Copper Crow. There's no doubt about that, but who's the other one? Which one of those foreign beings could possess superior powers to us patriarchs? You're not bluffing, are you?" You'll know soon enough whether I'm bluffing or not. After all, Yuan Yan and Naipan aren't that far away from where we are right now. Perhaps they'll be able to come and save you given enough time, but you'll have to be able to last that long first, Bao Hua replied in a cold voice. Liu Jai harumphed coldly in response, before falling silent once again. She knew that regardless of whether Bao Hua was telling the truth, she wouldn't be able to win in this war of words, so she chose to remain silent. A cold smile appeared on Bao Hua's face, and she suddenly said something that made Liu Jai's heart completely sink. Are you counting on the final trump card that you have up your sleeve? Do you think that you'll be able to make a comeback even if I kill you here? What do you mean by that? Liu Jai was finally unable to keep her cool any longer. I'm referring to the seventh clone that you've never revealed to anyone. You've always been very careful in hiding that seventh clone and never told anyone about it. But don't forget that there are no absolute secrets in this world, Bao Hua said with a smile. I don't believe that you actually know something. You must have heard some rumor somewhere and are trying to bluff me again. To Liu Jai's credit, she managed to remain calm even after her great secret was exposed. You're planning to revive yourself with that seventh clone if you die here, right? Even though it's only a clone, it won't be difficult for it to cultivate to your former level with your memories intact. Perhaps many years in the future, I'll fall prey to another nasty plot from you. Come to think of it, it's about time your seventh clone is hunted down, Bao Hua chuckled. What? You managed to find the hiding place of that clone? That's impossible. Who did you send to hunt it down? A hint of alarm and fury crept into Liu Jai's voice upon hearing this. Haven't you noticed that Hai isn't here? Bao Hua asked in an unhurried manner. Liu Jai's heart immediately eased upon hearing this. Hai, you think a mere body integration stage junior like him can break through the restrictions I set up? Hai would indeed struggle to break through your restrictions on his own, but what if he's carrying a profound heavenly treasure that just so happens to suppress your restrictions? Bao Hua mused. Liu Jai's expression completely darkened upon hearing this. You dared to lend him a profound heavenly treasure. Aren't you afraid that he'll take the treasure and run? I tampered with the profound heavenly treasure prior to lending it to Hai, so I'm not worried at all. All right, I've already done you a great favor by chatting with you and letting you live for so long. Now then, it's time to send you on your way, Bao Hua said in a cold voice. The pink flower petals that were drifting slowly through the white mist suddenly began to accelerate drastically, and all of them quickly expanded while becoming as sharp as flying swords. The white mist within the valley was swept up into a frenzy by the countless pink flower petals, and a string of earth-shattering booms rang out. All of a sudden, all of the flower petals and mist within a radius of around half a kilometer disintegrated into nothingness. A long while later, after all of the light and energy fluctuations had faded, only a single lonesome figure remained in the air above the valley, and she heaved a faint sigh before vanishing into thin air. On the summit of a giant mountain, Han Li and Yuan Yan were chatting like a pair of good friends. As expected of one of the three devilish patriarchs, some of Yuan Yan's cultivation insights were very eye-opening even to Han Li. As for Yuan Yan, he remained completely expressionless, but the intrigue in his eyes clearly indicated that he was also very interested to hear what Han Li had to say. Han Li was in the midst of talking about a secret technique when his voice abruptly cut off, and he cast his gaze toward a certain direction. He then rose to his feet with a smile and said, "Looks like fellow Taoist Bao Hua has exacted her revenge. In that case, I won't take up any more of your time, Brother Yuan." After that, he immediately flew away as a streak of azure light before Yuan Yan even had a chance to respond. Yuan Yan could only look on as Han Li departed with a resigned look on his face. Shortly thereafter, Han Li landed on the summit of a small mountain not far away, where Silvermoon was waiting for him with an anxious expression. Standing beside her were an elderly man and a handsome young man with shoulder-length silver hair. They were none other than Mo Jianli and Patriarch Aozayo. Both of them smiled as Han Li arrived before them, and Silvermoon immediately approached him with an elated expression. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D4 5F, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 38, letter 2 2F, letter 1D6 24, letter 1D6 30, letter 1D6 2E. 3 months later, a white flying boat with countless runes inscribed on its surface was flying at an incredible speed over the vastly renowned blue waterfall lake, completely disregarding the massive flight restriction that encompassed the entire lake. The devilish beings traversing over the surface of the lake down below were all quite stunned to see this, and after briefly pondering the situation, all of them put on reverent expressions, and some of them even knelt down and kowtowed on their boats. Only sacred ancestors of the wood dare to disregard the flight restriction in such a blatant manner, and all of the normal devilish beings down below were greatly honored and also very nervous to be in such close proximity to a powerful being of that caliber. The one on the flying boat was none other than Han Li, who had reached this region after using the teleportation formations in around a dozen devilish cities. His objective for this trip was Violet Spirit. He had promised her that if once he attained the ability to free her from Liu Jai's control, he would help her regain a human body and return to the spirit realm. Now that Liu Jai had already fallen by Bao Hua's hands, and there was no one in the entire Elder Devil realm that could pose a threat to him, he was naturally going to fulfill his promise and take Violet Spirit with him. As for sacred ancestor Lan Pu, she was one of the people who had been trapped in the ancient seal, so she had definitely already heard about Han Li's exploits. As such, even though she was aware that he was a human, she naturally wasn't going to try and oppose him. In what seemed like nothing more than the blink of an eye, the white flying boat arrived at the edge of the giant island that Blue Waterfall City was situated on, then descended toward a lush forest that was enshrouded under a layer of white light. Several restrictions in the form of white light barriers were instantly forced open by Han Li's enormous spiritual sense, and his flying boat quickly passed through, following which all of the restrictions immediately returned to their original state. Below the light barriers stood a huge pagoda that was several levels tall, and above the pagoda's front entrance was a plaque that had the words Vast Origin House in shimmering ancient characters. At the same time, a young woman who was lazily reading a book in a secret chamber on the 4th floor suddenly stood up from her chair with an alarmed expression. She then quickly made a series of hand seals, upon which an elated look surfaced in her eyes. "Young mistress, someone's forced their way through our restrictions." A flustered female voice rang out from below the stairwell. "It's all right, Aunt Zhu. We're being visited by a very esteemed guest," the young woman replied with an excited smile. Chapter 2252, Violet Spirit's Intentions. A short while later, Han Li appeared in the hall on the 3rd floor before taking a seat with the young woman. "Brother Han, no, I should be referring to you as Senior Han now. I knew that with your aptitude, you would reach the Grand Ascension stage sooner or later, but I didn't think that day would come so soon," the young woman said with a smile. "There's no need to be so formal, fellow Taoist Lan. You and I are old acquaintances, so just refer to me as you did in the past. It looks like your Vast Origin House already knows everything that happened at the original sealed site even without a recount from me," Han Li said with a benevolent smile. The young woman had done him a great favor in the past, so he naturally wasn't going to exert dominance over her now that he had reached the Grand Ascension stage. "In that case, I won't be so formal and rigid. Our Vast Origin House prides itself in being an all-knowing organization, so we've naturally received first-hand information regarding the 2 battles that took place in the original sealed site. However, never did we think that you and fellow Taoist Bao Hua would actually be able to kill the Stembora Queen. Now that such a major threat has been eradicated, I can continue to run my Vast Origin House without any qualms," the young woman chuckled. "It was someone else who landed the killing blow on the Stembora Queen in the end. Bao Hua and I just so happened to be in the right place at the right time. Otherwise, we would have struggled to even survive against the Stembora Queen, let alone put an end to its life. As for the specific details, I'm afraid that I can't disclose them to you," Han Li replied. "I see. In any case, even if you weren't the one who landed the killing blow, I'm sure you contributed greatly in the battle," Lan Ying insisted. "You think far too highly of me, fellow Taoist Lan. I came here today because I want you to contact Violet Spirit for me. I plan to take her back to the spirit realm with me," Han Li said in a straightforward manner. Leave that to me. Violet Spirit has constantly been cultivating in seclusion in a nearby area, so she should be able to get here in a few days. How about you stay at our Vast Origin House in the meantime, Brother Han?" Lan Ying suggested. "All right, I'll be in your care then, fellow Taoist Lan," Han Li agreed after a brief pause for contemplation. Lan Ying's smile became even more pronounced upon hearing this, and she asked a few more questions about the battles that took place in the original sealed site, listening with rapt focus to Han Li's answers. All of a sudden, a thought occurred to Han Li and he said, "By the way, there's something else that I need your help with." "Go ahead, Brother Han. Lan Ying immediately prompted. I have a few things that I'd like to show you. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release 4 balls of white light, which quickly revealed themselves to be 4 palm-sized translucent bricks. Lan Ying's expression immediately changed slightly at the sight of these objects. A treasure map left behind by sacred ancestor Qi Ling is inscribed on these bricks, and I obtained them by chance many years ago. Unfortunately, my understanding of the Elder Devil realm is very limited, so I've never tried to seek out these treasures, and that's where I require your assistance, Han Li said. Ah, so it's the secret treasure map left behind by Qi Ling. Truth be told, I've been searching for this treasure as well but haven't been able to find any leads. I didn't think that you would be in possession of the map. Rest assured, Brother Han, as long as the treasures are located in the Elder Devil realm, I definitely won't disappoint you, Lan Ying assured with a smile. Han Li nodded with a pleased expression. 5 days later, Han Li was finally reunited with Violet Spirit in the same hall. The two of them were naturally elated to see one another, but there was also a series of complex emotions in their hearts. Lan Ying had already vacated the hall in a thoughtful gesture to give the two of them some alone time. Violet Spirit had already been informed by Lan Ying that Han Li had reached the Grand Ascension stage, and she was stunned to hear from Han Li that Liu Jai had already perished. After all, the event had only taken place several months ago, and none of the people involved had intentionally leaked this information, so very few people knew about this. So that means I've finally regained my freedom and won't have to fear being refined into someone else's clone, Violet Spirit murmured to herself as her eyes glazed over slightly. Indeed, not only was Liu Jai killed, none of her clones managed to survive either, Han Li replied in a confident manner. That's quite a relief to hear. Why have you come to see me, Brother Han? Violet Spirit asked as she cast a hesitant gaze toward Han Li. Didn't you say that you wanted to revert back to a human body and see where the human race is residing in the spirit realm? I found a few secret techniques that can eradicate the true devilish qi within your body and return you to your former physique. After that, you'll be able to practice human cultivation arts even in the spirit realm, Han Li said with a smile. Violet Spirit was unsurprised to hear this, but after a brief silence she suddenly asked, Brother Han, I want to ask you something. Please tell me the truth. A sense of foreboding arose in Han Li's heart at the sight of Violet Spirit's expression, and he said, Of course, go ahead and ask me anything you want. I want to know roughly how much of a chance you have of ascending to the true immortal realm and becoming an immortal, Violet Spirit said with a serious expression. Han Li was rather taken aback by this question. Why did you suddenly think to ask me something like this? Please give me your answer, Violet Spirit insisted with a determined expression. Han Li hesitated momentarily before replying. If anyone else had asked me this, I definitely wouldn't tell them the truth. However, I have nothing to hide from you. In the past, my chances of successfully ascending would have only been just over 20%, but I encountered some opportunities during my trip to the original sealed site. I'm not sure whether those opportunities will spell fortune or tragedy for me, but they've doubled my chances of successful ascension. Violet Spirit was quite surprised to hear this. So there's a roughly 50% chance that you'll be able to ascend to the true immortal realm. I knew that you would definitely be far more powerful than normal Grand Ascension stage beings, but I didn't think you'd be this confident. Why have you decided to ask me this? Han Li asked once again. Instead of answering Han Li's question, Violet Spirit continued with a solemn expression. Please allow me to ask you another question, Brother Han. If I were to eradicate the devilish qi within my body and revert back to a human physique, my cultivation base will be severely impacted, right? Han Li could tell where this was going, and he was silent for a moment before replying. If you had only attained this devilish physique not long ago, then there's a good chance I'd be able to preserve your cultivation base. However, you've been cultivating under Liu Jai's guidance for many years, so your cultivation base will inevitably be impacted if I were to remove the devilish qi within your body. However, with my current power, it wouldn't be a difficult task to return you to your former cultivation base, and I guarantee that it won't affect your future cultivation. Ever since we parted ways last time, I've considered my situation extensively, and no matter how I thought about it, I always arrived at the conclusion that staying in the Elder Devil realm was the best option for me. Just like Liu Jai had once said, cultivating devilish arts is the ideal path for my physique. If I were to return to the spirit realm, perhaps I would be able to reach the Grand Ascension stage with your assistance and by some immense stroke of fortune. but it'll definitely be very difficult for me to ascend. I don't want to see you ascend and become a true immortal while I remain in the spirit realm and await my death with each passing heavenly tribulation, Violet Spirit said with a determined expression. Letter 1D627, letter 1D45F, letter 1D452, letter 1D452, letter 1D638, letter 1D626, letter 1D624, letter 1D630, letter 1D4C2. Han Li was silent for a long while upon hearing this before heaving a faint sigh. So you've made your decision. At your current cultivation base, I can still revert you back to your human physique, but as you progress, it'll become more and more difficult for me to do that. Once you reach the grand ascension stage, there will be no way for you to attain a human physique again. Rest assured, Brother Han, I've considered this decision thoroughly. I don't want to give up on even the slightest chance of ascending to the true immortal realm, Violet Spirit replied in a determined manner. Han Li looked into her resolute eyes for a long while before nodding as he sighed. In that case, I'll leave the decision to you. During my 2 journeys through the Elder Devil realm, I've obtained some devilish secret techniques and pills that will be very helpful to your cultivation. I'll leave them with you now. Thank you, Brother Han. With your powers, it shouldn't be too difficult to return to our holy realm, so I'm sure we'll have many more opportunities to meet in the future, Violet Spirit said as a faint blush appeared on her face. Chapter 2253, Final Evolution. Han Li was slightly saddened by Violet Spirit's decision, but he didn't try to persuade her any further. After all, just as she had said, her physique was more suited to cultivating devilish arts, and if she were to return to the human race, he wouldn't be able to ensure her ascension to the true immortal realm. As such, it was better for her to stay in the Elder Devil realm, and perhaps she would find her own opportunities. Thus, Han Li stayed at the vast origin house for an entire month. During this period of time, he bestowed all of his experiences and insights in cultivating devilish arts upon Violet Spirit to aid her in her cultivation. Lan Ying wasn't shy at all and also listened in on Han Li's lectures, benefiting immensely from the information that he divulged. For beings of their caliber, the wholehearted guidance of a grand ascension stage being was an extremely rare opportunity. As expected of a superpower that spanned across several realms, the vast origin house was able to find a place identical to the one on Qi Ling's treasure map within the span of this month, and this information was quickly delivered to Lan Ying, who immediately relayed it to Han Li. Han Li was naturally very elated to hear this. During the next few days, he visited some of the scenic attractions of the Blue Waterfall Lake area with Violet Spirit rather than continue to guide her in her cultivation. And as the two of them explored the region, they would often reminisce fondly about the time they had spent back in the human world. However, neither of them mentioned that night of lust and desire, and they weren't even all that intimate with one another. It was as if they were simply a pair of close friends. Time quickly passed by, and on this morning, Han Li finally departed from Blue Waterfall City. On the 4th floor of the vast origin house, Violet Spirit was staring at his departing figure through the window with a complex look in her eyes. Are you really willing to separate yourself from Brother Han like this, Sister Violet? I clearly recall that you were very much looking forward to being able to stay by his side not long ago, Lan Ying asked with furrowed brows. If I go with him, we'll temporarily be together, but what'll happen tens of thousands of years in the future? With his aptitude, it's only a matter of time before he ascends to the true immortal realm, and if I want to truly stay by his side, I have to do the same. Do I pursue temporary happiness or a chance at eternal happiness? What would you do if you were in my place, Sister Lan? Violet Spirit sighed. Lan Ying couldn't help but fall into deep thought upon hearing this. Half a month later, Han Li's white flying boat descended into a valley not far away from the Blue Waterfall Lake. Silvermoon was waiting for him under a huge tree with a faint smile on her face, and she was quite surprised to see that Han Li was alone. Did you meet Sister Violet Spirit? She asked in a gentle voice. I did, but she plans to continue cultivating in the Elder Devil realm, and I think that's a good decision too. If she continued to cultivate devilish arts here, there's a chance that she really will be able to take that final step, Han Li replied in a calm manner. If you agree with her decision, then it can't be wrong. In that case, should we return to the spirit realm? My grandfather and Senior Mo have already returned to the spirit realm along with all of the other Grand Ascension stage beings, Silvermoon asked. It's still too early to go back now. I have a devilish treasure map that should lead me to quite a large collection of treasures, Han Li replied. A treasure map? Silvermoon was rather taken aback to hear this. If everything goes smoothly, this should only take several months, Han Li said with a smile. All right, then let's set off right away, Brother Han, Silvermoon said with a smile before drifting onto the flying boat as a ball of silver light. Han Li nodded before gently stomping a foot down onto the flying boat, and it departed as a streak of white light. Several months later, Han Li's due arrived in a barren region that even high-grade devilish beings wouldn't venture into for no good reason. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D65A, letter 1D66C, letter 1D4E, letter 1D48F, letter 1D484, letter 1D490, letter 1D4F6. At the front of the flying boat stood a pair of giant ape puppets that were around 10 feet tall, and there was faint spiritual light flashing beneath their feet, clearly indicating that they were controlling the flying boat. Within a secret chamber in the cabin of the boat, Silvermoon was seated on a green futon with her eyes tightly shut, seemingly practicing some type of cultivation art. 5-colored spiritual light was revolving all over her body, and an extremely lifelike giant silver wolf projection had appeared behind her. In a nearby secret chamber that was enshrouded under many layers of protective restrictions, Han Li was also seated on the ground, inspecting an object in his hand with a hesitant expression. The object in his hand was none other than the black crystal that he had obtained after the Stembora Queen had been killed by the punishment lightning. It had been quite some time since Han Li had obtained the item, and after reading through some relevant tomes, he had discovered its origins. This was something that would be left behind by powerful insects like the Stembora Queen after they injected their essence entirely into their demonic cores when facing imminent destruction. Of course, if it were possible, those demonic insects would also try to inject a wisp of their soul into their demonic core to preserve it, but the Stembora Queen's soul had been well and truly destroyed. This crystalline core did possess remarkable defensive properties, but it stood no chance against immortal lightning like punishment lightning. The punishment lightning had already eradicated everything within the crystalline core, and even most of the core itself had been melted away. Han Li was currently appraising the object with a hesitant expression, seemingly in the midst of making a very difficult decision. A faint buzzing sound that was also inaudible rang out, but it was as clear as a thunderclap in Han Li's ears. Those guys are buzzing around again. It looks like they really want to get their hands on this thing. Unfortunately, this thing is very useful to me as well. If I were to absorb the essence within it, perhaps my provenance true devil arts would progress to another level, Han Li murmured to himself as a wry smile appeared on his face. Meanwhile, the buzzing was gradually growing louder and louder, and Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he swept a sleeve through the air to release 3 balls of golden light. The balls of light were then revealed to be 3 huge golden beetles with purple stripes all over their bodies. These were none other than the 3 faux gold-devouring beetles monarchs, and they were all staring intently at the object in Han Li's hand. The 3 of them then flapped their wings and shot forth directly toward the crystalline core as 3 streaks of golden light, and Han Li's expression darkened slightly as he reached out to make a grabbing motion. A burst of enormous invisible force erupted forth, and 3 golden beetles were immediately sent flying, tumbling through the air several times before they managed to right themselves again. The faux beetle monarchs were extremely powerful, but they were no match for the grand ascension stage Han Li. Even so, the 3 beetles continued to pounce toward Han Li with all their might, but were constantly kept at bay by that same burst of invisible force. Han Li's brows furrowed even further upon seeing this, and after a long while he heaved a long sigh as he murmured to himself, "So be it, this thing contains the Stembora Queen's essence, so it should be more suitable for other insects. If I were to refine it myself, who knows what after effects could arise? These 3 faux beetle monarchs have virtually reached the end of their evolution if they were to devour the Stembora Queen's essence as well." Having made his decision, Han Li withdrew the invisible force keeping the 3 faux beetle monarchs at bay while tossing the black crystalline core up into the air. The 3 golden beetles immediately changed directions to pounce toward the crystalline core again, and they instantly clashed as 3 streaks of golden light. They were trying to fend off one another while chomping down chunks of the crystalline core as quickly as they could. In the end, the core was torn into 3 sections of different sizes before quickly being devoured. After devouring the crystalline core, the purple stripes on the 3 faux beetle monarchs began to flash erratically, and their auras had also become extremely chaotic. The 3 of them hissed in a menacing manner as they pounced toward one another, and Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, but he made no effort to stop them. The battle between the three gold-devouring beetles was very fierce, and it didn't take long for all three of them to be riddled with wounds. Two of them had even lost a front limb each. After clashing for a while longer, the three beetles scattered as they hissed at one another in a threatening manner, then converged once again. The three of them were all severely wounded at this point, but they were still extremely ferocious and showed no signs of backing down. Henley looked on for a short while longer before a thought suddenly seemed to occur to him, and he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light that swept up the three gold-devouring beetles, causing them to instantly vanish on the spot. Chapter 2254, Old Enemy. After drawing the three gold-devouring beetles back into his spirit beast bracelet, Henley closed his eyes to meditate again. At the conclusion of the three gold-devouring beetles' battle, only the most powerful one would remain. As for whether that final foe beetle monarch would be able to evolve into a legendary gold-devouring beetle monarch, Henley wasn't all that confident. After all, it was said that gold-devouring beetle monarchs were so powerful that even true immortals were very wary of them. Of course, this was only a rumor. No race in the entire spirit realm had ever managed to nurture a gold-devouring beetle monarch before. As such, it was difficult to say just how powerful the beetle monarch would be. Henley would just have to wait and see. With his current powers, the average Grand Ascension stage being wouldn't be of much assistance to him. Thus, he had already decided that once he returned to the spirit realm, he was going to get his leopard Kirin beast to go into seclusion as well. Even though spirit beasts generally progress slowly with age, he should be able to accelerate that process with his vast collection of pills. With that in mind, Henley gradually entered a state of deep meditation. The white flying boat surged through the air without any disguise or concealment, but the Grand Ascension stage aura emanating from it was enough to scare away all of the nearby devilish beasts. Half a month later, a boundless snowland appeared down below. Heavy snow intermingled with frosty winds and chunks of fist-sized hail were sweeping incessantly through the air, but the flying boat was completely unaffected, enshrouded within a white light barrier. The two giant ape puppets continued to guide the flying boat forward, and several days later, the thick snow down below was nowhere to be seen, having been replaced by massive icy glaciers. There were countless transparent mountains of different sizes in the surrounding area, as well as some small white furry beasts that were running around on the ice, completely disregarding the flying boat up above. It was clear that these devilish beasts were of such a lowly caliber that they couldn't even sense Henley's almighty aura. All of a sudden, a streak of silver light shot forth from the flying boat, then flew through the cluster of beasts before returning to the boat in a flash. Silvermoon reappeared at the front of the boat amid a flash of silver light, holding a small white beast with a wide smile on her face. The beast bore a strong resemblance to a white bear, but it had a short blue horn and a pair of remarkably long ears, presenting a very adorable package. The little beast was currently being held by the scruff of its neck and was kicking erratically with its four legs in a blind panic. At the same time, traces of blue electricity were crackling around its short horn, and it seemed to be very uncoordinated. How interesting. This beast doesn't possess any devilish chi and seems to be more like a spirit beast from the human world, Silvermoon remarked as she stroked the little beast's furry head. That's an ice horn bear, one of very few types of low-grade devilish beasts in the Elder Devil realm that can survive without devilish chi, and they possess innate ice and lightning attribute abilities. A male voice sounded behind Silvermoon, and she turned around with an elated expression just as Henley emerged from the cabin of the boat in an unhurried manner. "You know about these beasts, Brother Han?" Silvermoon asked with a smile. "I once did some extensive research on the devilish beasts of the Elder Devil realm, and these devilish beasts that resemble spirit beasts really stuck out in my memory," Henley replied. "I see. Now that you've come out of seclusion, we must be quite close to our destination, right?" Silvermoon asked as a hint of excitement appeared in her eyes. "According to fellow Taoist Lan Ying, we should be half a day away from our destination at most," Henley replied as he quickly swept his spiritual sense through the surrounding area. Apparently, that sacred ancestor Qi Ling was once a vastly renowned figure in the Elder Devil realm. "I'm sure his collection must contain a lot of valuable treasures," Silvermoon said with a hint of anticipation in her eyes. "Who knows? Devilish beings use vastly different cultivation arts compared to us humans. Perhaps things that are regarded as precious treasures to them aren't very useful to us. However, I heard that the Ink Spirit Holy Ark, one of the top 3 flying treasures of the Elder Devil realm, was in his possession. If I can obtain that treasure, it would be worth this trip, Han Li said with a smile. One of the top 3 flying treasures of the Elder Devil realm. That does indeed sound quite remarkable. I would also like to see it, Silvermoon said in an excited manner. Han Li was just about to respond when his expression suddenly changed slightly, and he cast his gaze toward a certain direction. Did you discover something, Brother Han? Silvermoon asked. It seems that we've run into an old acquaintance, Han Li said with a smile as he peered into the distance with blue light flashing within his eyes. An old acquaintance, one that I'm familiar with as well. Silvermoon was rather taken aback to hear this. That's right, both of us have quite a bit of history with her. Let's go and pay her a visit, Han Li said as he withdrew his gaze. It really is someone that I know. I'm very intrigued to see who it is. Silvermoon had also swept her spiritual sense toward the same direction, but her sensory range was limited, and she was unable to discover anything. Han Li smiled and remained silent as he tapped a foot down onto the flying boat, upon which it immediately changed directions. A distance of tens of thousands of kilometers was covered by the flying boat in the blink of an eye, and it arrived near an icy mountain that was tens of thousands of feet tall. A string of rumbling explosions were ringing out incessantly above the mountain, sending powerful shockwaves sweeping through the air in all directions. The mountain had already been reduced to just over half its original size, and the surrounding ground was filled with uneven craters and littered with countless chunks of ice of different sizes. At the center of the commotion, white glacial chi was clashing with bright blue light, and it seemed that there were 2 gargantuan creatures locked in a fierce battle. Han Li looked on through narrowed eyes, and the flying boat drew to a halt at his behest, hovering still in midair. Silvermoon was also appraising the battle in the distance with curious eyes, but unfortunately, the world's origin chi was extremely chaotic there, and she was unable to see anything. However, judging from the ferocity of the clashes, the 2 combatants were definitely far more powerful than the average devilish lord. It's her. Silvermoon extended her spiritual sense forward, and a hint of shock immediately appeared on her face upon sensing a familiar aura. Han Li merely smiled and remained silent as he continued to spectate the battle from afar. With his enormous spiritual sense, he was naturally able to see everything as clearly as if it were unfolding right in front of him. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D5 FF, letter 1D4 1E, letter 1D6 AT, letter 1D6 A0, letter 1D4 1E, letter 1D5 54, letter 1D5 60, letter 1D6 96. After around 15 minutes, an earth-shattering boom suddenly erupted up ahead, and a ball of blue light exploded violently, threatening to destroy everything in the surrounding area. A blood-curdling beastly roar rang out as a white worm that was over 100 feet in length emerged out of thin air amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. Its body was riddled with wounds, but it didn't pay any heed to its own injuries as it frantically fled from the scene. Right at this moment, an elegant figure appeared, and spatial fluctuations erupted up above as a giant blue claw emerged before crashing downward to slice the white worm's body into several segments. Scorching black flames then erupted out of the giant claw to sweep up the white worm's dismembered body. The white worm howled with anguish as the segments of its body thrashed violently in the flames, but it was unable to escape. In the blink of an eye, its body and soul were all incinerated into nothingness. Only then did Han Li break his silence. Looks like there's some affinity between us, fellow Taoist Yuan Cha. I didn't think I'd run into you in such a secluded place. You don't seem to be in the best condition at the moment. The elegant figure was an extremely beautiful woman with skin as fair as jade, and it was none other than sacred ancestor Yuan Cha. She was wearing a suit of blue armor, but it was only glowing with very dim light, and not only was her face very pale, her aura was also fluctuating in a very unstable manner. What was most perplexing of all was that she seemed to only possess a body integration stage aura. I also didn't expect to see you here, fellow Taoist Han. Could it be that Bao Hua changed her mind and sent you to finish me off? Instead of being all that surprised to see Han Li, a sour look appeared on her face. That's not the case. I did assist Bao Hua on that one occasion, but that's all. Do you think I'm some sort of subordinate to Bao Hua? Han Li asked as his expression darkened slightly. Yuan Cha faltered slightly upon hearing this before a wry smile appeared on her face. Please forgive me for misunderstanding the situation, fellow Taoist Han. Come to think of it, now that you're at the Grand Ascension stage, Your powers are most likely not inferior to Bao Hua's, so there's no reason for you to do her bidding and finish off a disabled wretch like me. Disabled? There is indeed something wrong with your aura. Why has it fallen to below the Grand Ascension stage? Did Bao Hua do this to you? Han Li asked. No, I did this to myself, Yuan Cha replied, much to Han Li's surprise. Chapter 2255, Discovering the Treasures. You're telling me you disabled your own cultivation base? Han Li asked with a skeptical expression. If I hadn't done that, there's no way that Bao Hua would be content with only banishing me to this place. After all, I was the one she once trusted the most, yet I stabbed her in the back. It's already a huge surprise to me that I was able to survive this ordeal, Yuan Cha explained. I see. To think that she was still willing to let you live after what you did to her. The two of you must have really been quite close, Han Li said as he nodded with a contemplative expression. Fellow Taoist Han, we've had our differences in the past, and I'm no longer any match for you, so I'm completely at your mercy. Are you going to take revenge for what I did to you back then? Yuan Cha asked as a forlorn look appeared in her eyes. I would be inclined to exact my revenge if Bao Hua hadn't handed down any punishment to you, but I have no intention of doing that now. Not only has your cultivation base been severely debilitated, your mental state has already fallen apart, so it's already quite remarkable that you were able to maintain your current cultivation base. There's no longer any hope for you to return to the Grand Ascension stage. Seeing as you were once a Grand Ascension stage sacred ancestor, I won't ask you to do anything too degrading. Just sever one of your own arms and I'll let bygones be bygones, Han Li said. Yuan Cha faltered slightly upon hearing this before a wry smile appeared on her face. An arm? Is that all? That's certainly not an issue. As soon as her voice trailed off, she raised an arm before opening her mouth to release a streak of white light, which revolved around her raised arm, instantly severing it at the shoulder. However, the cross-section of the wound was as smooth as a mirror, and there was no blood flowing from it. Yuan Cha then made a grabbing motion with her other hand, and her severed arm exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Can I go now? After severing one of her own arms, Yuan Cha's face had paled even further. Han Li nodded in response, displaying no intention to punish her further beyond this. Letter 1D6A letter 1D5FF, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D4, 1E, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D556, letter 1D68C, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D5FA. Thank you for your kindness, fellow Taoist. You and I will most likely never meet again. Yuan Cha extended a slight bow toward Han Li, then flew away as a streak of blue light. As she flew through the air, a new arm began to take shape amid a cloud of black qi to replace her severed limb, but losing an arm had undoubtedly taken a toll on her. Are you really just going to let her go, Brother Han? Aren't you worried that she'll try to take revenge against you in the future? Silvermoon couldn't help but ask. Bao Hua was willing to spare her, so it's not really in my place to kill her. After all, who knows what type of bond may still exist between them? The fact that Bao Hua was willing to let her live even after what she did clearly indicates that their relationship was not an ordinary friendship. I'll be visiting the Elder Devil realm in the future as well, so I'd rather not do something that would drive a wedge between myself and one of the three devilish patriarchs. As for revenge, there's next to no chance for Yuan Cha to return to the Grand Ascension stage, and her heart is already dead, so she most likely won't even be able to muster up the urge to seek revenge. If she can't return to the Grand Ascension stage, then her lifespan will run out shortly, so there's nothing for me to worry about, Han Li replied. That's true. Besides, with your powers, you wouldn't have anything to fear even if she could return to the Grand Ascension stage. How the tables turn. Back in the human world, just a wisp of her soul was able to almost kill both of us on Kunwu Mountain, but now, she's been reduced to such a sorry state, Silvermoon sighed. She naturally didn't have any sympathy for Yuan Cha. It was just that the vast contrast evoked a series of complex emotions in her heart. Yuan Cha poses no threat to us, but we should still secure Qi Ling's treasure as soon as possible in case something goes wrong, Han Li said. You're right, Brother Han. Silvermoon naturally had no objections, and thus the flying boat continued on toward their original destination. Half a day later, the flying appeared in the air above the flat glacier, but what was quite peculiar was that there was a small green lake at the center of the glacier. The lake appeared to only several thousand acres in size, but it was bubbling incessantly, and steam was rising up from its surface. There were also some short shrubs growing around it, presenting a miraculous sight in this frozen landscape. The flying boat quickly descended, and Han Li briefly inspected the surface of the lake before an intrigued smile appeared on his face. "This is the place on the map, Brother Han. It does look quite different from the surrounding area. After so many years, how have none of the devilish beings that have passed by noticed this place?" Silvermoon asked. Ling was a Grand Ascension Stage sacred ancestor. His treasure collection can't be discovered by the average high-grade devilish being. Besides, even if another Grand Ascension Stage devilish being were present, they most likely wouldn't be able to find anything, either, without this map, Henley said with a smile as he swept a sleeve toward the lake, and the 4 translucent bricks shot forth before hovering above the lake while emanating 5-colored light. Henley then made a hand seal before pointing a finger down at the lake, and uttered the word "open." Countless runes surged out of the 4 bricks in a frenzy, forming a 5-colored light formation that was around an acre in size. The light formation then immediately began to rotate at a rapid speed, and a dull thump rang out from its center as a gray pillar of light erupted forth before vanishing into the lake in a flash. Spatial fluctuations surged through the lake, and the surface of the lake began to ripple violently. A black vortex had also appeared right beneath the light formation, and it was revealing countless black tendrils. "So this is the entrance to where the treasures are hidden. It sure is well concealed. Looks like we'll most likely have to go through some trouble to obtain the treasures in there," Silvermoon said with an excited expression. "Let's go. Even if there are restrictions in there, there's no way they can stop us," Hanley said with a nonchalant smile, and the flying boat beneath his feet abruptly vanished amid a flash of spiritual light. The 2 of them immediately drifted down toward the lake. As soon as they entered the black vortex, the 5-colored light formation above the lake reverted back into 4 translucent bricks, which also plunged into the vortex, immediately following which the vortex disappeared as well. Time slowly passed by, and the surface of the lake returned to its former placid state. After a long while, Hanley and Silvermoon were walking side by side through a maze beneath the lake. There were thick round pillars all around them, and all of the pillars were over 100 feet tall, with black chi revolving around them. Faint ghostly wails rang out incessantly in the surrounding area, and if a normal cultivator were to hear this sound, they would immediately be struck by a sense of drowsiness and sluggishness. However, Silvermoon was easily able to keep the sound at bay by conjuring up a layer of protective spiritual light, while Hanley was able to simply ignore the sound altogether. The sky above the round pillars was completely concealed by a blanket of black mist, and all of a sudden, several blurry projections erupted out of several of the nearby stone pillars. The projections were in the form of giant menacing wolves, and even as they pounced toward Hanley, he didn't pause in the slightest as he released a burst of gray light to sweep up the oncoming projections in a flash. Meanwhile, 2 of the giant wolf projections had pounced toward Silvermoon, and they were met by a giant silver wolf projection that devoured the oncoming pair of projections in a single mouthful. After that, the 2 of them continued onward as if they were taking a stroll in the park. "How many waves has it been, Brother Han?" Silvermoon suddenly asked. "That was the 7th wave," Hanley replied in a calm manner. Surely this wouldn't be the extent of the restrictions set up by the vastly renowned sacred ancestor Ling. "These restrictions don't even pose any threat to a body integration cultivator like me, let alone a Grand Ascension Stage being like you," Silvermoon chuckled. "If you continue to think like that, you're going to fall into Ling's trap," Hanley replied in an indifferent voice. "What do you mean by that, Brother Han?" Silvermoon was rather befuddled to hear this. Hanley smiled and asked, "Do you really think these pillars are just here to make some sound effects and manifest some spatial tempering stage beast projections? Is there something special about them?" Silvermoon asked with a surprised expression. "Let me show you something," Hanley said with a smile, then suddenly raised a hand and made a grabbing motion. A burst of silver spirit flames immediately erupted between his fingertips, and he grabbed onto something before forcibly pulling it out of thin air. Silvermoon's eyes widened as she stared intently at Hanley's hand, and Hanley smiled as he slowly spread open his fingers. Chapter 2256, Giant Puppet. Within the silver flames was a thin gray line that was writhing incessantly, but no matter how much it struggled, it was unable to fly out of Hanley's grasp. Silvermoon was quite stunned to see this, and Hanley explained, "This is contaminant yin qi, which appears to be a living creature, but actually possesses no shape or form. It can seep into one's physical body without being detected, and under normal circumstances, even body integration stage beings wouldn't be able to detect it. Only after it accumulates to a certain extent and spontaneously erupts will its presence be made known. What? Doesn't that mean I've already? Silvermoon was given quite a fright upon hearing this, and hurriedly inspected her own internal condition. Rest assured, I'm aware of this thing's presence, so I naturally wasn't going to allow it to approach us. I've already kept it out with my spiritual sense, Han Li chuckled. You gave me a huge fright there. You withheld this information from me on purpose, didn't you? Silvermoon said as she rolled her eyes in an unintentionally seductive display. Even with Han Li's resolute and steadfast mental state, he couldn't but be momentarily entranced by her stunning beauty, and he immediately averted his gaze. It's not that I didn't want to tell you about this in advance. It's just that this type of chi is only dangerous due to its undetectable nature. Once detected, even a spatial tempering stage being would be able to easily keep it at bay with their spiritual sense. So it's that easy to ward off. That's quite a relief. Silvermoon was elated to hear this, and she hurriedly released her spiritual sense as well. We should reach sacred ancestor Qi Ling's treasure once we get out of this maze, right? We already passed by 2 so-called treasure pavilions, but the treasures in there will only be able to fool the average devilish being. They're nowhere near valuable enough to catch our eyes, Silvermoon said with a smile. An ordinary sacred ancestor most likely wouldn't be capable of setting up any other measures, but back in sacred ancestor Qi Ling's heyday, his reputation was virtually comparable to that of the 3 devilish patriarchs, so there should be more stern obstacles ahead, Han Li replied. What else could he have set up? I'm guessing it's most likely going to be some type of powerful restriction or formation, Silvermoon speculated. Perhaps, Han Li replied in an indifferent manner. While the two of them were conversing with one another, another cluster of beastly projections emerged, only to be promptly eradicated. At this moment, they finally emerged from the maze, and a giant red gate that was several hundred feet tall appeared up ahead. The gate's surface was riddled with inky black devilish patterns, and it seemed to be extremely heavy. Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward the gate while appraising it with blue light flashing within his eyes, and he said in a rather surprised manner, "This gate is constructed from fire origin crystal. Looks like this sacred ancestor, Qi Ling, was wealthier than I imagined." Han Li pointed a finger toward the giant gate as he spoke, and a ball of silver flames shot forth from his fingertip before vanishing into the gate in a flash. Countless bursts of crimson flames immediately erupted out of the gate in a frenzy, transforming it into a giant flaming gate. But at the same time, the gate slowly began to open amid a burst of rumbling. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. A scorching aura instantly swept forth from behind the gate, and as soon as it came into contact with Silvermoon, her expression changed drastically as she stumbled back a few steps while the protective spiritual light around her body flashed erratically. Behind the giant gate was a sea of crimson flames that were far hotter than normal flames, and even the body integration stage Silvermoon didn't dare to let it come into direct contact with her body. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but he remained still on the spot. With his spirit engulfing heavenly flames, there was no way that these flames would be able to harm him in the slightest. However, he could sense some restriction fluctuations emanating from within the sea of flames, so it clearly wasn't as simple as it appeared. With that in mind, he immediately made a hand seal before opening his mouth to expel a silver fireball, which instantly transformed into a massive fire raven that was around 10 feet in size. The fire raven spread its wings and let loose a clear cry, then plunged headfirst into the sea of flames. All of the crimson flames in the path of the fire raven immediately parted, creating a path that was around 10 feet wide. "Let's go, Silvermoon," Han Li said as he took a step forward, then abruptly appeared right at the center of the path. Silvermoon smiled and immediately followed along behind him. Thus, the two of them were able to traverse through the sea of flames behind the silver fire raven. Beneath the parted sea of flames were countless fist-sized crimson crystals that littered the entire ground, and each crystal was releasing wisps of crimson fire. Han Li and Silvermoon were both hovering around 10 feet in the air as they flew along behind the silver fire raven, and they reached the center of the sea of flames in the blink of an eye. All of a sudden, the ground below the silver fire raven split open, and a thick arm holding a giant translucent blade lashed out to instantly slice the fire raven in half. If a normal spirit beast were to be dealt such a heavy blow, they would at least suffer severe injuries and perhaps even be killed. However, the fire raven possessed no substantial body, so the two halves of its body instantly fused back into one again. Immediately thereafter, it swooped down while vigorously flapping its wings downward, sending countless streaks of silver light crashing down onto the ground below. A string of resounding booms rang out, and countless crystals embedded onto the ground were shattered by the streaks of silver light. The crimson arm that had just emerged was instantly riddled with holes, and it seemed to be on the verge of completely crumbling away. Right at this moment, another massive crimson fist erupted out of the nearby ground before landing a vicious blow on the silver fire raven, releasing a flurry of countless crimson runes that completely scattered the fire raven into countless specks of silver flames, rendering it unable to return to its original form in a short time. Hanli stopped in midair upon seeing this, and his eyes narrowed slightly, while a surprised look appeared on Silvermoon's face. The sea of flames began to surge violently, and the ground down below tremored as a humanoid puppet that was over 100 feet tall emerged. The puppet wore a suit of crimson armor that covered every single inch of its body, and its body was attached to the crumbling arm that was holding the giant blade. There were wisps of crimson flames revolving all over the puppet's body, and a crimson crystal was embedded into its glabella. "This is a devil crystal puppet," Hanli exclaimed upon getting a clear view of the giant puppet. This puppet was far larger than the other devil crystal puppets he had seen before, but its aura indicated that it was definitely a devil crystal puppet, and one of quite a high caliber at that. "What's a devil crystal puppet?" Silvermoon asked. Devil crystal puppets are created using a puppet refinement technique unique to the Elder Devil realm. I've seen some in the past, but none of them can compare with this puppet, which is close to the pinnacle of the body integration stage, Hanli quickly explained. Right at this moment, the giant puppet had already completely emerged from the ground, and it immediately sent its giant blade crashing down toward Hanli. The puppet was quite massive and bulky, but its saber strike was as fast as lightning, and it instantly reached Hanli, striking him with a bone-chilling sensation that threatened to freeze his blood solid. "Heavenly frozen light. Interesting. No wonder you were able to scatter my spirit-engulfing fire raven." Hanli's eyes lit up as he swept his spiritual sense toward the giant blade, then raised an arm upward, catching the blade in a casual manner. A dull thump rang out as powerful shockwaves erupted in all directions, causing the entire sea of flames to surge violently once again. Glacial light was surging toward Hanli from the giant blade, but he seemed to be completely unaffected. Indeed, with Hanli's current physical body, this glacial light was nowhere near powerful enough to harm him. However, that wasn't the extent of the giant puppet's abilities. A cold light flashed through its eyes, and it suddenly opened its mouth to release a pillar of white light. At the same time, it swept its other arm through the air, and a giant crimson hand emerged before crashing down viciously toward Hanli with countless runes revolving around it. A burst of scorching red light came surging down along with the arm, and a charred odor immediately wafted through the air. The red light seemed to be capable of melting through space, and that was a clear testament to just how fearsome it was. Hanli's expression darkened slightly as he swept a sleeve forward to release a burst of gray light. As soon as the pillar of white light came into contact with the gray light, the former abruptly vanished into thin air. At the same time, Hanli extended a pristine white hand out of his sleeve, before thrusting it toward the oncoming red light and giant crimson hand in an unhurried manner. Chapter 2257, Puppet Army. His nonchalant-looking palm strike was instantly able to pierce through the red light before clashing with the giant crimson hand, which was immediately struck by a burst of devastating force and crumbled into powder. Despite this, the giant puppet remained completely expressionless, and crimson light radiated from its body as several devilish beastly projections that resembled cow-tiger hybrids emerged before pouncing toward Hanli. Right at this moment, Hanli opened his mouth to release a streak of azure sword chi, which instantly reached the puppet before revolving around its massive body. Spiritual light flashed violently from the puppet's body, but it was still sliced in half at the waist and toppled to the ground. As for the beastly projections that had just been conjured up, all of them disappeared into plumes of smoke. However, in the next instant, scorching crimson flames erupted from the crystals on the ground, releasing countless translucent threads that abruptly pulled the two halves of the puppet's body together again, and its wounds were instantly healed. Han Li's expression remained unchanged upon seeing this, and he thrust a hand downward, upon which a shimmering golden hand that was around an acre in size appeared above the puppet before crashing down with devastating might. The giant puppet was completely immobilized under the tremendous power being exerted by the palm, and countless white cracks appeared all over its body before it exploded into a ball of red light. A fist-sized ball of golden light erupted out of the explosion before immediately attempting to flee, but Han Li seemed to have already anticipated this, and he harumphed coldly as he made a grabbing motion with his outstretched hand. The golden ball of light was immediately enveloped by a burst of enormous power, then drawn into Han Li's grasp, and he looked down to find that it was a golden ball that was riddled with holes and intricate runes. The ball was virtually weightless, seemingly completely hollow. "This is most likely the core of the puppet," Han Li said with an intrigued expression as he inspected the golden ball in his hand. A wry smile appeared on Silvermoon's face upon seeing this. She knew that Han Li's powers would be unimaginable to her now that he had reached the Grand Ascension stage, but she hadn't witnessed him in action since his breakthrough, so there was no standard for her to judge just how powerful he was. However, she knew that she would definitely be no match for that giant puppet, yet Han Li had destroyed it with ease. This made it clear to her just how massive a disparity there was between her and Han Li, and the realization saddened her slightly. Just as she was becoming absorbed in her own thoughts, the specks of silver flames in the air converged, and the silver fire raven re-emerged. However, on this occasion, Han Li didn't spur on the fire raven to continue onward. Instead, he stowed the golden ball in his hand away before sweeping his spiritual sense through the surrounding area, then immediately made a hand seal. The fire raven raised its head and let loose a clear cry, following which its body began to swell drastically in size. In the blink of an eye, it had swelled to over 1,000 feet in length, forcing the surrounding sea of flames back to create a massive empty area. Han Li then pointed a finger up at the silver fire raven before uttering the word, "Absorb." A burst of loud rumbling rang out as the fire raven flapped its wings to release countless silver runes, and at the same time, a burst of enormous suction force surged forth in all directions. The surrounding sea of flames instantly converged toward the fire raven through around a dozen massive pillars of flames, and as soon as the flames came into contact with the fire raven's body, they were instantly absorbed. As the fire raven absorbed more and more crimson flames, its body expanded further and further, and it didn't take long before the entire sea of flames was completely absorbed, thus finally revealing the true appearance of the surrounding area. Silvermoon quickly inspected her surroundings, and a surprised look appeared on her face. They were currently situated on a tall platform around 1,000 acres in size that was riddled with crimson crystals. Around the platform was a boundless trench, within which were countless deep craters of different sizes. Spiritual light was flashing within all of those craters, and within each of them was a devil crystal puppet. These puppets were clad in suits of 5-colored armor, wielding weapons of different shapes, forms, and sizes, and there were even some menacing beastly puppets among them. At a glance, it could be estimated that there were close to 100,000 of these puppets. Han Li quickly swept his gaze through the surrounding area, and he discovered that most of the puppets were at the core formation stage and nascent soul, and around 10% of them were at the deity transformation stage and spatial tempering stage. However, what was most eye-catching were the dozens of top-grade puppets that bore a strong resemblance to the one that Han Li had just destroyed. Those devil crystal puppet hadn't reached the late body integration stage yet, but they were all still at the early and mid-body integration stage. If this army of puppets were to appear in the outside world, it would be powerful enough to raise many major powers to the ground. Looks like sacred ancestor Qi Ling was a master in refining devil crystal puppet. That's quite a pleasant surprise, Han Li said as he stroked his own chin with a faint smile. Silvermoon was already completely dumbstruck by what she was seeing, and only now did she return to her senses as she asked, "What do you plan to do with these puppets?" "I'm going to take them all away, of course. What else would I do? Leave them for someone else," Han Li replied without any hesitation. "All right, I'll help you collect them," Silvermoon said in an excited voice. Han Li nodded in response, and Silvermoon immediately rose up into the air, flicking her wrist to release several storage bracelets toward all of the puppets in one direction. Han Li also swept a sleeve through the air to release dozens of storage bracelets that surged toward the other direction. Spiritual light of all colors surged out of these storage bracelets in a frenzy, and all of the devil crystal puppets swept up by the spiritual light quickly disappeared. There was an astonishing number of puppets present, but the two of them were able to collect the puppets quite quickly by working together. However, when attempting to collect the dozens of body integration stage puppets, the puppets suddenly released light barriers to keep the storage bracelets at bay. As opposed to being enraged by this, Silvermoon was quite elated, and she immediately began flicking incantation seals of different colors through the air, all of which vanished into the bodies of these top-grade puppets in a flash. The giant puppets' bodies shuddered slightly before they relinquished their resistance and were also stowed away into the storage bracelets. After the final puppet had been collected, the entire platform suddenly began to sink into the ground on its own amid a burst of loud rumbling. Silvermoon hurriedly flew back to Han Li's side upon seeing this, while Han Li raised a hand to withdraw the silver fire raven before standing on the spot with his hands clasped behind his back. Letter 1D453, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 1D452, letter 1D464, letter 1D452, letter 1D450, letter 1D450, letter 1D45A. Only after the entire giant platform had sunk over 1,000 feet into the ground did the violent tremors cease. Right at this moment, Han Li and Silvermoon's attention were both drawn toward the same direction, where an azure stone door was situated on a gray stone wall. "Let's go. I can't sense any restriction fluctuations in there, so that must be where sacred ancestor Qi Ling's true treasure is stored," Han Li said with a smile. Silvermoon nodded in response, with a hint of excitement in her eyes. Thus, the two of them immediately made their way toward the stone door. Once they were no more than several tens of feet away from the stone door, Han Li thrust a hand through the air, and the door was pushed open by a burst of enormous power. A massive hall was revealed behind the gate, within which were a series of long stone benches with various items placed upon them. A hint of elation surfaced in Han Li's eyes, and he immediately strode into the hall with Silvermoon in tow. After entering the ball, Han Li inspected his surroundings to find that jade boxes of different sizes had been placed all over the stone benches alongside treasures of different descriptions. All of these treasures were either glowing with scintillating light or were dilapidated and completely unremarkable in appearance. However, judging from their auras, all of them were top-grade treasures that could easily start a war in the outside world. Despite this, Han Li didn't display much interest toward these treasures. Instead, his gaze was drawn toward the three stone platforms in the hall, which stood taller than all of the stone benches. Atop these three intricate stone platforms were three different items, comprised of a rusty azure halberd, a yellow gourd, and an inky black flying arc that was only around half a foot in length. Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward the three treasures, and his expression immediately changed slightly. Silvermoon's attention had also been drawn entirely to those three treasures. Chapter 2258, Return to the Spirit Realm. Han Li swept a hand toward the azure halberd first, and it immediately flew over to him. He caught the halberd before giving it a brief appraisal, then smiled as he handed it over to Silvermoon. "This is a treasure that's incorporated a fragment of a profound heavenly treasure. It's not very useful to me, but it should be perfect for you." "Thank you, Brother Han." Silvermoon accepted the halberd with glee and began to inspect it with an elated expression. Meanwhile, Han Li drew the yellow gourd into his grasp, and after another brief appraisal, a hint of surprise appeared on his face. He then flipped his hand over to stow the gourd away, before casting his gaze toward the final treasure among the three. That miniature flying arc was most likely the legendary Ink Spirit Holy Arc. Han Li inspected the arc through narrowed eyes for a short while, then made a hand seal and pointed a finger at the arc. The miniature arc shuddered slightly before rising up from the stone platform on its own, and inky black runes surged forth around it as it began to swell drastically in size. All of the treasures in the hall began to buzz incessantly, as if to resonate with the black arc. Around an hour later, the surface of the lake up above suddenly began to churn, and massive waves surged forth in all directions. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and the entire glacier that the lake was situated upon shattered, upon which a gargantuan black object emerged amid a flurry of ice and snow. This was a gigantic arc that was over 10,000 feet in length. The arc was comprised of over 10 levels, and it had countless profound spirit patterns etched onto its surface. At the front and rear ends of the giant arc stood around a dozen giant silver flags of different heights, bearing images of all types of strange and exotic beasts. An army of devil crystal puppet guards was situated on the deck of the Ark, and as soon as it appeared, the Ark sped away as a ball of black light, vanishing into the distance in the blink of an eye. 2 months later, a rumbling boom suddenly rang out above a small mountain range in the spirit realm, and dark clouds converged from all directions to form an enormous black vortex. Bursts of spatial fluctuations erupted out of the vortex, and countless silver arcs of lightning intertwined within the vortex, following which a massive black arc slowly emerged. The entire nearby space warped violently as if the sky were about to be torn apart, and on the top level of the arc stood Han Li and Silvermoon. We're finally back to the spirit realm. That was easier than I expected. It's quite a pleasant surprise that this arc possesses spatial abilities as well, Han Li said as a pleased look appeared on his face. The entrance of the spatial node that we found wasn't all that stable, so I thought it would take more time to return to the spirit realm, Silvermoon said with an excited smile. In any case, this trip to the Elder Devil realm was a very fruitful one, Han Li said with a smile. Indeed it was, Silvermoon replied with an elated nod as she thought of the portion of Qi Ling's treasures that Han Li had given to her. All right, now that we're back to the spirit realm, let's ascertain our current location and return to the Holy Island. Senior Mo and Senior Aozio should both be waiting for us there, Han Li said in a calm manner as he quickly swept his spiritual sense over the entire mountain range. Oh, it sounds like we aren't too far away from human territory, Silvermoon remarked. We've arrived somewhere slightly different from our anticipated destination, but fortunately, this place is even closer to human territory than expected, Han Li replied. That's great, let's set off right away, Silvermoon said in an ecstatic manner. Thus, the black arc tremored slightly before hurtling through the air at Han Li's behest, while the black vortex slowly vanished not long after the arc's departure. Half a year later, a patriarch Aozio and Mo Jianli were discussing something in a hall that was situated on the Holy Island. On either side of the hall stood the dozen or so Holy Island elders. Patriarch Aozio's brows were tightly furrowed with concern as he said, "Fellow Taoist Han should be back by now. Could it be that he's encountered some trouble in the Elder Devil realm?" Mo Jianli shook his head in response. "Don't worry, fellow Taoist Han is far more powerful than we can imagine. How can anything happen to him when even that Stembora queen wasn't able to kill him?" That may be true, but there are countless powerful beings in this world, and he's often getting himself into trouble. Who knows if he's landed himself in some hot water again, Patriarch Aozio said as he pursed his lips. Haha, why do you sound like a grumpy father scolding his son-in-law? You're not really trying to make a match out of your granddaughter and fellow Taoist Han, are you? Mo Jianli said as he stroked his chin with an amused smile. So what if those were my intentions? With Linger's aptitude, I can't say that she'll become a grand ascension stage being for sure, but she's definitely more likely to get to that level than everyone else here. Besides, if my granddaughter becomes Han Li's Tao companion, our human and demon races will truly be one massive family, Patriarch Aozio said. Awkward looks appeared on the faces of all of the Holy Island elders in the hall upon hearing this, but they didn't dare to raise any objections. Mo Jianli could only shake his head with a wry smile, but he had to admit that Patriarch Aozio was right. I heard that fellow Taoist Han already had a Tao companion in the human world, and they seemed to be very close. Otherwise, he wouldn't have refrained from finding a Tao companion even after spending so many years in the spirit realm. That may be true, but it's extremely common for beings of our caliber to find a few Tao companions. I may be old, but I'm not senile yet, and I can tell that fellow Taoist Han definitely has some feelings for my Linger, Patriarch Aozio chuckled. Mo Jianli nodded in response with a thoughtful expression. Come to think of it, fellow Taoist Han is still far younger than us. If he's willing to find a few more Tao companions for himself, there's a good chance that he'll be able to produce some extremely talented descendants. Patriarch Aozio faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he was just about to respond when a slightly exasperated male voice suddenly rang out in the hall. Please stop making jokes at my expense, fellow Taoists. Otherwise, I wouldn't even dare to come and see you. As soon as the voice trailed off, Han Li and Silvermoon appeared at the entrance to the hall amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. Han Li was currently wearing a resigned expression, while Silvermoon had a faint blush on her face. We pay our respects to Senior Han. The Holy Island elders hurriedly gathered to pay their respects, while Patriarch Ao Zio and Mo Jianli exchanged an ecstatic glance. "You're finally back, fellow Taoist Han. I was growing a little worried." "Haha, I thought you de-eloped with my Linger." The two Grand Ascension stage beings also rose to their feet to greet Han Li. "Sorry for making you worry, fellow Taoists," Han Li said with a smile before giving the Holy Island elders a slight nod of acknowledgement. "You can all go now. The two of us wish to speak to fellow Taoist Han in private," Patriarch Ao Zio said to all of the elders. The Holy Island elders immediately gave affirmative responses before exiting the hall. Following the departure of the elders, Han Li took a seat across from Mo Jianli and Ao Zio, while Silvermoon made her way over to Patriarch Ao Zio and gave him an indignant pout before standing behind him. It was clear that she was still quite embarrassed by what he had said earlier. "Fellow Taoist Han, Brother Ao Zio and I would have most likely perished in the Elder Devil realm if it hadn't been for you. I'll remember what you did for us," Mo Jianli said in a genuine manner as he cupped his fist in a salute toward Han Li. "Indeed, if fellow Taoist Han hadn't come to rescue us, that ancient seal would have become a tomb for all of us. I'll be sure to repay you for this, fellow Taoist Han." Patriarch Ao Zio also expressed his gratitude toward Han Li. "You're far too kind, fellow Taoists. You've done so much for our two races over the years. It was only expected of me that I would do everything in my power to save you," Han Li hurriedly replied. That's not the same thing. We have indeed contributed greatly to our two races, but that still doesn't change the fact that you saved our lives. This is something that we must repay you for," Mo Jianli insisted. Patriarch Ao Zio also nodded in agreement. Han Li could only shake his head with a resigned smile upon seeing this. After that, Han Li and the two Grand Ascension stage beings discussed their experiences in the Elder Devil realm, as well as some matters regarding the Stembora Queen. Of course, Han Li made no mention of the ancient true immortal still residing in the original sealed site. He merely attributed the destruction of the Stembora Queen to Bao Hua and the ancient seal, and Patriarch Ao Zio and Mo Jianli had no reason to suspect that he was lying. "Fellow Taoist Han, you've only just returned, so why don't you take a rest and refrain from going anywhere for now?" Mo Jianli suddenly said with a slightly peculiar expression. Chapter 2259, Sanking Lightning Talisman. "What do you mean by that, Brother Mo?" Han Li could immediately tell that there was a hidden meaning behind Mo Jianli's words. "Brother Ao's next heavenly tribulation is going to arrive soon, and we'll have to assist him with that," Mo Jianli sighed with a grim expression. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he immediately turned to Patriarch Ao Zio. "Is that true, grandfather?" Silvermoon's smile also instantly faded as her face paled slightly. My heavenly tribulation should have arrived over 1,000 years ago. It's only been delayed to this point as I had taken some special measures. As a result, this heavenly tribulation will be even more fearsome than it otherwise would have been. However, I never had much of a chance of transcending this tribulation to begin with, so the benefits outweighed the consequences. During this period of time, Linger has reached the body integration stage, and fellow Taoist Han has become a new pillar for our two races, so I can let go without any qualms now, Patriarch Ao Zio chuckled. "So you did this for my sake," Silvermoon said in a trembling voice. "Not entirely. Even if you didn't exist, I would have still made the same decision so I could be around to protect our two races from the invasion of the Elder Devil race," Patriarch Ao Zio said with a shake of his head. However, Silvermoon was shaking her head vigorously, clearly not trusting his alibi. "Is there really no hope for you to transcend this heavenly tribulation, fellow Taoist Ao? If you require certain treasures, I can try to seek them out for you," Han Li said with tightly furrowed brows. "If I hadn't delayed this tribulation, I'd still have a roughly 10% chance of being able to transcend it, but now, that probability has fallen to less than 5%. As for treasures, I've already prepared as much as I can. There are a few that I still haven't found, but it was always going to be a struggle to find them, so I'm not too fixated on that," Patriarch Ao Zio sighed. "Less than 5% is way too low. Isn't there any way to increase that probability, grandfather?" Silvermoon asked as tears began to well up in her eyes. "If that disciple of fellow Taoist Han, with the recessive lightning spiritual root were a Grand Ascension stage being, that probability would be increased by about 10% with his assistance, but as he currently is, he won't be of any use," Patriarch Ao Zio replied. Silvermoon's face paled even further upon hearing this. Han Li and Mo Jianli could only exchange a resigned glance as well. Perhaps it would be possible for them to raise Hai Yueshin's cultivation base to the body integration stage in a short time, but it was entirely impossible to help him reach the Grand Ascension stage on such short notice. As for Han Li's extreme mountains, they were very effective against heavenly lightning tribulation, but they had already been completely refined, so he couldn't lend them to anyone even if he wanted to. There's one thing that may be able to increase your chances of transcending your heavenly tribulation by as much as 15% to 20%, Mo Jianli suddenly said. What is it, Senior Mo? A hopeful look immediately appeared in Silvermoon's eyes upon hearing this. At the same time, a surprised look appeared on Patriarch Ao Zio's face, indicating that he had never heard Mo Jianli mention this before. Instead of directly answering Silvermoon's question, Mo Jianli asked, "You've heard of Patriarch Shizin, right, fellow Taoist Ao Zio?" "Of course. Isn't he the Cloudmount race Grand Ascension stage being who entered the original sealed site with us? I spoke to him on one occasion, but didn't he perish in the ancient seal in the end? What does this have to do with him?" Patriarch Ao Zio asked. Patriarch Shizin didn't possess any treasures that could resist heavenly tribulations, but he did know of such a treasure, and that treasure should be in the spirit race, Mo Jianli explained. Prior to entering the Elder Devil realm, those foreign Grand Ascension stage beings stayed at the spirit race for some time, so this information is most likely reliable. But what exactly is this treasure that you're talking about, Brother Mo? Patriarch Ao Zio asked. I'm referring to the Sanking Lightning Talisman, Mo Jianli finally revealed. Patriarch Ao Zio's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. What? Isn't that a talisman that can only be found in the true immortal realm? Is there really such a talisman in our realm? Han Li was also quite taken aback by this revelation. The Sanking Lightning Talisman was one of very few types of treasures that could resist Grand Ascension stage heavenly tribulation, so it was vastly renowned across all realms. However, this was a disposable treasure, and it had always been said that only true immortals of the true immortal realm would be able to refine such talismans, so no one had actually ever seen one. Letter 1D4 1F, letter 1D563, letter 1D556, letter 1D4 1E, letter 1D430, letter 1D556, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D428, letter 1D46. Thus, as time passed, even most of the Grand Ascension stage beings gradually became unconvinced that such talismans could be found in the lower realms. As such, it was naturally a massively pleasant surprise for Patriarch Ao Zio to hear that this talisman could be found in the nearby spirit race. Theoretically speaking, there shouldn't be any Sanking Lightning talismans in the lower realms, but Patriarch Shizin saw the talisman in person, and I can guarantee you that his information is reliable. As for why that is, I'm afraid I can't reveal that, Mo Jianli said with a meaningful expression. In that case, I'm sure this information is trustworthy, but why is it that Patriarch Shizin didn't try to obtain those talismans for himself? Even though he was quite far away from his next heavenly tribulation, surely he wouldn't be willing to miss out on such a priceless treasure, Mo Jianli said with furrowed brows. Indeed, I would also do everything in my power to obtain such a treasure if I were to discover one, Han Li chimed in agreement. It's not that Patriarch Shizin didn't try to obtain the treasure. He had already made an agreement with the owner of the talismans, and once he returned to the Elder Devil realm, he would fulfill the agreement and receive the talisman, Mo Jianli said with a smile. Even Patriarch Shizin had to make an agreement with that spirit being. Who is it? A hint of wariness appeared on Patriarch Ao Zio's face as he spoke. Who else could it be? Mo Jianli sighed with a wry smile. A perplexed look appeared on Silvermoon's face upon hearing this, but a thought then immediately occurred to her. Meanwhile, Han Li suddenly chuckled. You must be referring to the spirit monarch. Patriarch Ao Zio and Mo Jianli exchanged a quick glance upon hearing this, and the latter nodded in response. I am indeed referring to the spirit monarch. He is in possession of the Sanking Lightning Talisman, and he seems to have more than one. More than one? Patriarch Ao Zio was quite taken aback to hear this. According to relevant tomes, no matter how many Sanking Lightning Talismans one possessed, only a single one could be used per heavenly tribulation. I've heard some things about the spirit monarch, but I don't know too much about him. It seems that both of you are quite wary of him, Han Li observed as his eyes narrowed slightly. That's an understatement. If possible, Brother Ao and I would choose to never have any interactions with that old monster, Mo Jianli replied with a wry smile. Oh, why is that? Han Li asked. The spirit race isn't a large race, and its overall power could well be inferior to the combined power of our human and demon races. But the spirit monarch is very likely to have lived for over 1 million years, Patriarch Alzio explained. 1 million years? How is that possible? Han Li was truly stunned to hear this. I had the exact same reaction when I first heard about this, Mo giantly chuckled. If the spirit monarch really has lived for over 1 million years, then the number of heavenly tribulation he must have endured. Han Li didn't complete his sentence, but what he was trying to convey was very apparent. I don't know about that. No one has witnessed the spirit monarch transcend a tribulation, nor heard any news about his tribulation transcendence. Some people say that the spirit monarch is a special being that experiences a heavenly tribulation only once every 100,000 years, while others speculate that the title of spirit monarch has already been passed down several times in secret. As for which one of those theories is correct, no one really knows, Patriarch Alzio said. If he really has lived for over 1 million years, then even I'll have to be quite wary of him, Han Li said with a contemplative expression. One thing is for sure. The aura and appearance of the spirit monarch has remained consistent during these past 1 million years, according to the descriptions of the past grand ascension stage beings of our two races. Thankfully, it's extremely difficult for new spirit beings to be born, so even if the spirit monarch possesses unfathomable power, he's unable to expand the spirit race's current territory. On top of that, the spirit monarch is a very mysterious man, and he's rarely ever been involved in a battle during the past 1 million years, Mo giantly added. Chapter 2260, Trip to the Spirit Race. It looks like this spirit monarch really is very mysterious. Do you know what kind of deal Patriarch Shizin struck with the spirit monarch in exchange for that Sanking lightning talisman? Han Li asked. I'm afraid that's the only piece of information I didn't manage to gather. All I know is that the spirit monarch asked Patriarch Shizin to do something very dangerous for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have promised Patriarch Shizin a Sanking lightning talisman as compensation, Mo giantly replied. Han Li and Patriarch Alzio were both quite surprised to hear this. If it hadn't been for the injuries that I had sustained in the Elder Devil realm, I would have most likely paid the spirit race a visit as soon as I returned from the Elder Devil realm, Mo giantly said with a wry smile. Why didn't you mention this to me before, brother Mo? If we had combined our powers, perhaps we would have been able to obtain a Sanking lightning talisman from the spirit monarch, Patriarch Alzio said as his brows furrowed slightly. What good would that have done? You had also sustained some injuries in the Elder Devil realm, and your heavenly tribulation was imminent. If your injuries had been worsened even further during our confrontation with the spirit monarch, you'd probably be in even worse shape to transcend the tribulation even with one of those talismans. However, there's some hope now that fellow Taoist Han has returned. If I'm not mistaken, fellow Taoist Han's aura has become even more unfathomable compared to back before he entered the Elder Devil realm. If he's willing to make the trip with me, it's possible that we could obtain a few Sanking lightning talismans from the spirit monarch, Mo giantly said. What, you want to go to the spirit race with fellow Taoist Han? Patriarch Alzio's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. That's right. With fellow Taoist Han to accompany me, the spirit monarch wouldn't dare to plot against us even though the relations between the spirit race and our two races is rather strained. On top of that, we'll have to make this trip sooner or later. After all, my heavenly tribulation isn't far away either, and I'm also not very confident that I'll be able to transcend it. In addition to that, the Sanking lightning talisman will be very useful for fellow Taoist Han as well. Who knows if it could save you during a future heavenly tribulation, Mo giantly said. A hesitant look appeared on Patriarch Alzio's face, and he didn't say anything in response. Senior Mo, if those talismans really are that valuable, then the task that the spirit monarch wants to have done is most likely going to be extremely dangerous, Silvermoon cautioned. Mo giantly seemed to have already considered this, and he replied, it's naturally going to be dangerous making a deal with the spirit monarch, but cultivators like us are constantly living on a knife's edge. Of course, fellow Taoist Han doesn't have to worry about heavenly tribulations anytime soon, so if the risk really is too great, then I can try to complete the task on my own. Letter 1D68F, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D41E, letter 1D430, letter 1D68T, letter 1D41C, letter 1D698, letter 1D55E. Silvermoon cast her gaze toward Han Li upon hearing this, then turned to look at Patriarch Alzio, and a complex look appeared on her face. If we can obtain a Sanking lightning talisman, How much would it increase fellow Taoist Ao Zio's chances of transcending his next heavenly tribulation? Han Li asked. At least 15%, Mo Jianli replied in a concise manner. Patriarch Ao Zio remained silent, clearly agreeing with this figure. That's a significant improvement. Fellow Taoist Ao Zio, how much longer will you be able to delay your heavenly tribulation? Han Li asked. 10 more years at most. I won't be able to manage any longer than that, Patriarch Ao Zio replied. 10 years should be more than enough time, Han Li said as a decisive look appeared in his eyes. Obtaining the Sanking Lightning talismans would be greatly beneficial to all three of us, and it could save fellow Taoist Ao Zio from a potentially dire situation, so there's no reason for me not to go on this trip. Here, Brother Mo, Han Li said with a smile as he swept a sleeve through the air, sending a ball of white light flying directly toward Mo Jianli. Mo Jianli reflexively caught the streak of white light to discover that it was a small white vial that was giving off a faint medicinal aroma. Those pills are very effective for aiding in recovery. Take those pills and go into seclusion for a year, and you should be fully recovered from your injuries. When that time comes, we'll be able to go and see the spirit monarch with no qualms, Han Li said. You have my thanks, Brother Han. Mo Jianli was ecstatic to hear this, and he immediately opened the vial to examine its contents with his spiritual sense before stowing it away. If he had only had access to normal pills, then it would have taken several times longer to recover from his injuries. After that, Han Li turned to Patriarch Ao Zio and said, Fellow Taoist Ao Zio, if I'm not mistaken, your injuries seem to be far more severe than fellow Taoist Mo's. Even your soul appears to have been wounded. Back when I was trapped in the ancient seal, I fell prey to sneak attack by several extremely powerful insects, and my soul was damaged as a result. It'll take some more time for me to recover, and I'm not 100% sure whether I'll be able to fully recover before my heavenly tribulation. If I can't, then my chances of transcending my heavenly tribulation will be even less than 5%, Patriarch Ao Zio sighed. Is that true, grandfather? Silvermoon was distraught to hear this. Why would I lie about something like this? Patriarch Ao Zio sighed in a resigned manner. Silvermoon immediately turned to Han Li with an urgent expression. Brother Han, do you have? Han Li raised a hand to cut her off before summoning several vials of different colors, then tossed them toward Patriarch Ao Zio. Rest assured, I have some pills in my possession that can heal spiritual injuries as well. Thank you, Brother Han. I knew you'd have a way. Silvermoon was ecstatic to hear this, and her eyes were filled with gratitude as she appraised Han Li. Patriarch Ao Zio's eyes lit up as he caught the vials, and he also extended his gratitude toward Han Li in an ecstatic manner after examining the vial's contents. Haha, looks like both of us are becoming even more indebted to fellow Taoist Han, Mo Jianli chuckled. It's all thanks to your help that I'm where I am today. I'm simply repaying you for the kindness that you've shown me. Once Brother Mo recovers from his injuries, we'll make a trip to the spirit race and try to obtain a few Sanking Lightning talismans. As for fellow Taoist Ao Zio, you just worry about recuperating and making preparations for your tribulation transcendence. Once we obtain the talismans, we'll immediately return so we don't miss your tribulation, Han Li said. Patriarch Ao Zio sighed as he rose to his feet before cupping his fist in a formal salute toward Han Li and Mo Jianli. I'll be sure to remember this, but if it's not doable, then please don't force the issue. There are only 3 Grand Ascension stage beings in total in our 2 races. It would be an extremely heavy blow if something were to happen to any of us. Even if I obtain a Sanking Lightning talisman, my chances of transcending my next heavenly tribulation are still quite low, so it's not worth taking too big a risk. Han Li hurriedly rose to his feet to return the salute, while Mo Jianli remained seated, and chuckled. Haha, I'm not doing this for you. I may not even be willing to make this trip had I not heard that the Spirit King had more than one of those talismans. The gratitude in Patriarch Ao Zio's eyes wasn't lessened in the slightest upon hearing this. We've known each other for tens of thousands of years. Do you think I can't tell when you're being facetious? Mo Jianli merely smiled and remained silent. Come to think of it, you must have been trying to lead me onto this topic of conversation by telling me to take a rest and stay in our human race. It looks like your concern for me wasn't genuine, Han Li suddenly said with an amused smile. An awkward look appeared on Mo Jianli's face upon hearing this, while a hint of color finally returned to Silvermoon's complexion. She was very hopeful that Han Li and Mo Jianli would be able to bring back a Sanking Lightning talisman, so that her grandfather would have a greater chance of transcending his next heavenly tribulation. After that, they began to discuss some topics regarding the recuperation of the two races. Han Li was informed that during these past years of effort, the damage caused by the devilish invasion had been mostly rectified, and that there were also some supremely talented young cultivators that had arisen among the two races. Han Li was naturally quite intrigued by this and asked some relevant questions. Thus, the discussion continued for close to half a day before everyone departed. That night, Han Li was reunited with his disciples in a cave abode on the Holy Island that was filled with extremely abundant spiritual qi. As Han Li swept his gaze over his disciples, a pleased look appeared on his face, but as his gaze fell upon the youngest Bai Guor, that pleased expression suddenly turned into surprise. Chapter 22:61 Acquaintance in the Primordial World. I'm surprised that you've already reached the late deity transformation stage in such a short time, Guor. Looks like your ice essence body is living up to its reputation, Han Li said with a smile. It's all thanks to your guidance and pills, Master. Otherwise, there's no way I would have reached this level so quickly, Bai Guor replied with a respectful duck of her head. Qilingzi, you've also reached the late deity transformation stage bottleneck, right? Han Li asked. Qilingzi's heart jolted slightly upon hearing this, and he hurriedly replied, I am indeed only one step away from reaching the late deity transformation stage, but I'm unable to take that step no matter what I try. Looks like it's about time you two ventured into the primordial world. Your cultivation journey has progressed very smoothly thus far due to your exceptional aptitude and the pills I provided you with, but if you want to reach the spatial tempering stage, cultivation alone won't allow you to get there. As is the case with a flower in a greenhouse, there's no way you can develop to your full potential without experiencing hardships. Only in the primordial world can you find the opportunities that belong to you. I can bestow upon you my experiences and insights, but they may not be suitable for you, Han Li said in a meaningful voice. Qilingzi was elated to hear this, and he replied, Thank you for your guidance, Master. I had also been considering whether it was time for me to venture into the primordial world. Now that I've received your approval, I can make a decision. Junior Marshal Sister Bai and I will be preparing for the journey right away. Bai Guor also agreed with an unchanged expression, clearly having already anticipated this. The primordial world is an extremely perilous place, and it's not uncommon to see even body integration stage beings perish in there. You two are only at the late deity transformation stage, so that risk is naturally only heightened for you. As such, I have some treasures for you to use when your lives are under threat, Han Li said. Thank you, Master. Qilingzi and Bai Guor didn't know what treasures Han Li would bestow upon them, but they were still very grateful in advance. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing 2 storage bracelets, one for each disciple. I've already prepared the treasures, and I had originally intended to wait for a few years before giving them to you, but it looks like I'll have to change my plans. There aren't many treasures in those storage bracelets, but if you use them wisely, you'll be able to save yourselves several times even against the average body integration stage being, Han Li said in a confident manner. Qilingzi and Bai Guor injected their spiritual sense into the storage bracelets, and they were ecstatic with what they saw as they extended another grateful salute. Master, Senior Marshal Brother Qi and Junior Marshal Sister Bai are both going to the primordial world. Can I also? Hai Yueshan was already becoming rather fidgety upon hearing Han Li's instructions for Qilingzi and Bai Guor to go to the primordial world, and now that Han Li was presenting them with treasures, he couldn't but step forward as well. HMPH, you're currently only at the early deity transformation stage. Even if I give you a life-saving treasure, you won't be able to unleash much of its power. Besides, even though you've temporarily weathered the storm stirred up by your recessive lightning spiritual root, who knows whether there are still people watching you from the shadows? Perhaps you'll be abducted by some old monster as soon as you leave the Holy Island to be used as a tribulation transcendence tool. Stay on the island and continue to cultivate for now. As long as you stay on the Holy Island, even the grand ascension stage beings of the foreign races wouldn't dare to come after you. This will be your punishment for not being able to keep your mouth shut, Han Li harumphed coldly in response. Hai Yueshan shuddered upon receiving this scolding, and he hurriedly said, Please just pretend like I never said anything. Once Qilingzi departs for the primordial world, you'll be in charge of his disciples until he gets back. Hopefully, the added responsibility will help you become more steadfast and mature, Han Li said with a smile. Yes, master. Xianxia and Hai Yueshan both gave affirmative responses, but the latter was still rather displeased by this arrangement. After that, Han Li turned to Zhu Gyur, and his expression eased slightly as he said, "Your cultivation base has also improved. Looks like you haven't been slacking off during your time on the Holy Island. Come to my room tomorrow at noon. I have some things that I want to ask you." Zhu Gyur was quite elated to hear this, and she immediately replied, "Yes, senior." "By the way, have you received any news about fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix?" Han Li asked. Xianxia replied, "We haven't received any news from Senior Ice Phoenix yet, but her soul lamp has remained lit this entire time, so we presume that she was still exploring the primordial world. It's about time she came back. Could it be that she's encountered some trouble? Even if her soul lamp is fine, she could still be trapped somewhere," Han Li mused with a contemplative expression. Senior Ice Phoenix is a spatial tempering stage being, and with her Ice Phoenix body, she should be able to ensure self-preservation even against the average body integration stage being, so she should be fine, Hai Yueshan said. "I certainly hope so," Han Li replied with furrowed brows. Meanwhile, in the air above a certain body of water on the Tian Yuan continent, a white-robed young man with golden and silver patterns on his face was facing off against a pride of fiery lions. The young man's appearance was very ordinary, and he bore a slight resemblance to Han Li. Several hundred feet behind the young man stood a beautiful silver-robed woman, looking on at the confrontation with a cold expression. "What a bunch of idiots! I only concealed my aura for a brief moment, and they immediately rushed out to attack me. So be it, I haven't had any live prey in a long while. You'll suffice as a meal," the white-robed young man harumphed coldly as he appraised the pack of deity transformation stage lions. He then made a hand seal, and 6 identical wings appeared on his back amid a flash of white light. The 6 wings were only around a foot in length each, and they were extremely thin, to the point that they were virtually transparent. The fiery lions facing him weren't very intelligent, but their ruthless instincts were triggered by the young man's actions, and the largest lion that was leading from the front immediately let loose a ferocious roar. All of the lions immediately released a scorching heat wave toward the young man, and a few of them had even blasted fireballs out of their mouths. In the face of their collective attacks, a cold smile appeared on the white-robed young man's face, and he suddenly flapped his 6 wings, upon which he instantly vanished on the spot. The fireballs instantly exploded in midair, sending ferocious waves of flame sweeping in all directions, encompassing even the silver-robed woman who was standing not far away. The silver-robed woman's expression darkened slightly, and she remained on the spot, but a translucent white phoenix projection that was over 100 feet tall suddenly emerged behind her. The projection flapped its wings, and a burst of white glacial chi swept forth to envelop her in a secure barrier. The barrier made a sizzling sound as it came into contact with the flames, but remained resolute and kept the flames at bay. Right at this moment, a 6-winged projection appeared among the pride of lions in a wraith-like manner. The white projection traversed through the scorching flames as if they didn't even exist, then plunged an arm into a nearby fiery lion like lightning. Translucent light swept forth from the arm, and a formidable glacial aura instantly snuffed out the flames burning on the lion's body, then sealed it into a massive block of ice. The other lions hurriedly retreated in a panic upon seeing this, then pounced toward the white projection again, but at this point, the projection had already vanished. Meanwhile, the lion that had just been sealed in ice exploded into massive chunks amid an anguished wail. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted beside a few other fiery lions, and the 6-winged projection re-emerged before plunging an arm through another lion's body. Thus, one lion was quickly felled after another, and once most of the pride had been slain, the remaining fiery lions were finally struck by a sense of fear. Their leader let loose a low roar, and all of them immediately fled as giant fireballs. "You're not getting away that easily." The white projection reverted back into the white-robed young man, who cast his gaze toward the fleeing lions with a cold expression. Immediately thereafter, around a dozen identical arms sprouted out of the young man's abdomen, and he thrust those arms toward the fleeing fiery lions from afar, then released around a dozen pillars of translucent light. Chapter 2262, Vast Yin Stone. The pillars of light vanished in a flash, and at this point, all of the fleeing fiery lions had been frozen into massive chunks of ice. A cold look appeared on the white-robed young man's face as he flapped his wings and instantly appeared before one of the blocks of ice, then thrust a nonchalant palm toward it. The fiery lion within the ice abruptly shuddered, then exploded into a cloud of blood mist. A ball of red light formed by its soul was desperately darting around within the blood mist, but was unable to escape its icy prison. The white-robed young man then opened his mouth in an unhurried manner to expel a burst of white light that seeped into the chunk of ice, sweeping up both the blood mist and the lion's soul before drawing them into his mouth to be devoured. He then did the same thing to a few other fiery lions, and a pleased look appeared on his face as he turned to the silver-robed woman in the distance. "Fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix, would you like to taste some of this live prey? It's quite delicious." The silver-robed woman was none other than the Ice Phoenix that had left the human race many years ago. However, her aura was several times more powerful than it had been back then, and she seemed to be only one step away from reaching the body integration stage. "I don't consume live prey. You can help yourself, fellow Taoist," the Ice Phoenix replied in an expressionless manner. Immediately thereafter, he devoured the rest of the fiery lions in the blink of an eye, then arrived back beside the Ice Phoenix. "Let's keep going, fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix. I heard that the U-race nearby shares close ties with a certain major race on the Thunder continent, so they must have set up a super teleportation formation capable of traversing between continents. If we can make use of that, we'll be able to save a lot of time," the white-robed young man said. The Ice Phoenix hesitated momentarily before asking with a grim expression, "Are you really planning to travel to the Thunder continent, fellow Taoist Six Wing?" "Of course. If I hadn't received the news that my former master has also reached the Grand Ascension stage, I would have perhaps returned to the human race, but now a trip to the Thunder continent is mandatory. Otherwise, with my current powers, I'm not confident that I'll be able to defeat him." The white-robed young man chuckled coldly, and even his expressions bore a striking resemblance to Han Li's. "If I recall correctly, Brother Han treated you quite well in the past. In fact, if he hadn't fed you all those pills, you wouldn't even have been able to attain intelligence, let alone make it to this point," the Ice Phoenix said as her brows furrowed slightly. "My intention to kill Han Li has nothing to do with how he treated me in the past. Back when he was my master, he planted a servant mark in my soul. Even though I've erased most of its effect using a secret technique, I won't be able to completely escape its influence unless he's dead. I've already attained intelligence in a human form, so I'm destined to pursue the great Tao. How could I allow such a damning weakness to continue to exist? As such, this trip to the Thunder Continent is one that I absolutely must make," the white-robed young man replied in a cold voice. "Even so, do you really think you'll be able to find what you're looking for on the Thunder Continent? That thing only exists in legends. If you ask me, you have next to no chance of finding it," the Ice Phoenix said. "Don't you worry about that. I wouldn't be making this trip if I didn't have confidence. The plain Yin race has indeed rarely ever been sighted on the Thunder Continent, but it's said that this race can communicate directly with the Yin star to manifest plain Yin star Qi. If I can absorb that star Qi with my reverse spirit true Yin technique, I'll be able to attain a body that's powerful enough to match those of true spirits. When that time comes, I'll be able to kill Han Li with ease," the white-robed young man replied in a nonchalant manner. The Ice Phoenix's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and she said through gritted teeth, "Why is it that you insist on taking me along with you? If you want to kill me, then just do it." "Why would I do that? Extreme Yin beings that have attained human bodies like you and I are extremely rare, and we're of opposite genders as well, so we're a perfect match. After I kill Han Li, you can become my Tao companion," the white-robed young man chuckled. The Ice Phoenix's face paled upon hearing this. "You're a Grand Ascension stage being. Don't you think it's unbecoming of someone of your status to force others into becoming your Tao companion?" "HMPH, it's exactly because I'm a Grand Ascension stage being that I'm unwilling to give up on a potential Tao companion like you, who possesses power of the same attribute as myself and aptitude to match mine as well. As for how others see me, why should I care?" the white-robed young man harumphed in a disdainful manner. A hint of fury flashed through the Ice Phoenix's eyes upon hearing this, but she knew that she had no chance of escaping from this man, so she simply fell into a brooding silence. The white-robed young man didn't continue the conversation either, and he swept a sleeve through the air, upon which a six-winged white centipede projection emerged behind him, then encompassed both of them before flapping its wings and flying away as a streak of white light. After just a few flashes, Both of them had vanished into the distance. Meanwhile, on the Holy Island, Han Li discussed some important matters with his disciples in his cave abode, then waved a dismissive hand and instructed, "All right, aside from Bai Guor, you can all go now. I'd like to speak to her in private." "Yes, master." "Yes, senior." Qi Lingzi, Hai Yueshan, and Zhu Guor all gave affirmative responses in a respectful manner before exiting the hall, leaving only Han Li and Bai Guor in the room. "Guor, do you know why I asked you to stay behind?" Han Li asked following everyone's departure. "I'm assuming it has something to do with my upcoming journey to the primordial world," Bai Guor replied after a brief hesitation. "You're a smart girl. It does indeed have something to do with that. Do you remember what I said when I first took you as my disciple?" Han Li asked with a faint smile. "Are you referring to the object that you wanted me to seek out with my ice essence body? I never dared to forget this even for a single instant," Bai Guor hurriedly replied. "He, now that you've reached a decent cultivation base and are about to head to the primordial world, I can disclose the full details of the task to you," Han Li said. "Please go ahead, master," Bai Guor prompted in a respectful manner. "The task shouldn't be too difficult for you to complete. The item that I want you to search for is known as Vast Yin Stone, and it's generally situated hundreds of thousands of feet below glaciers and surrounded by boundless glacial qi, so it's undetectable to spiritual sense. Only someone like you with an ice essence body would be able to sense it from afar. I require a lot of this material, so I'll need you to collect it for me during your journey. If you can find a satisfactory amount, I'll be sure to reward you handsomely," Han Li said. "If you hadn't saved me from my dire condition as a child, I wouldn't even be alive today. I'll be sure to do everything in my power to complete the assigned task," Bai Guor immediately replied as she knelt down onto the ground. "Your cultivation base isn't very advanced, so don't force yourself. Just keep an eye out for this material during your journey," Han Li said as he gestured for Bai Guor to rise to her feet. Bai Guor stood up and gave an affirmative response, but in her heart, she had already decided that she was going to search for vast yin stones with all her might. After chatting for a while longer, Han Li dismissed Bai Guor, and thus, he was the only one left in the hall. He sat on his chair and tapped the armrest absent-mindedly with one hand, while stroking his chin with the other. Back when he had first obtained the refinement method for the integrated 5 extreme mountains, he had thought that he would only be able to refine 1 or 2 extreme mountains at most. To his surprise, he had encountered many opportunities since then, allowing him to refine the extreme essence-effused mountain, extreme high zenith azure mountain, and extreme 5 elemental yin-yang mountain. If Bai Guor could track down enough vast yin stones to allow him to refine the extreme vast yin glacial mountain as well, then he would have 4 extreme mountains in total. The only one that remained was the extreme Great North Essence Mountain, which he had received some leads on back in the human world. With his current powers, it would naturally be impossible to descend into the human world in person, but it wouldn't be impossible for him to send a spiritual sense clone into the human world with the help of a few realm-breaking treasures. However, this was quite a risky ploy, and he had to devise a good plan before he could make the decision. If he could complete the full set of integrated 5 extreme mountains, not only would he not have to fear his next few heavenly tribulations, they could even help him transcend his ascension tribulation. With that in mind, a faint smile appeared on Han Li's face. Chapter 2263, Emergence of the Beetle Monarch. Half a day later, Han Li was seated on a futon within a secret chamber on the Holy Island that was surrounded by powerful restrictions. There was a yellow ball of light hovering before him, within which was contained a fist-sized yellow gourd. This was none other than one of the 3 most premium treasures he had obtained from Qi Ling's collection. The azure halberd had been given to Silvermoon, and the final one of those 3 treasures was naturally none other than that ink spirit holy ark. The azure halberd had been infused with a fragment of an unknown profound heavenly treasure, granting it immense metal and wood attribute powers. As for the ink spirit holy ark, not only was it extremely massive and fast, it also possessed the ability to tear through space, so it certainly lived up to its reputation as one of the top 3 flying treasures of the Elder Devil realm. In contrast, this yellow gourd was refined from some type of unknown material that could absorb one's spiritual sense, and its lid was sealed tightly on its opening, making it impossible to open through conventional means. As such, Han Li had no idea what the gourd contained, nor what its true purpose was. However, whenever he grabbed the gourd and shook it around, a string of resounding booms would ring out within, indicating that it most likely contained something quite extraordinary. The mysterious nature of the gourd naturally made Han Li very intrigued. Back when he had first obtained the item, he had swallowed it and used his true essence to refine it day and night. Now that so many days had passed, the treasure had finally been mostly refined and could be truly opened. Han Li appraised the gourd momentarily before making a hand seal, then instantly flicked his 10 fingers through the air. A string of 5-colored runes shot forth, then vanished into the gourd in a flash. He then made an extremely peculiar hand seal, and the Provenance True Devil projection emerged behind him amid a flash of golden light. A ball of black chi also surged out of his glabella before transforming into the Law Destruction Eye. Black light flashed erratically within the eye, following which an inky black translucent thread shot forth before revolving around the opening of the gourd in a flash. The lid of the gourd shuddered before falling off on its own. A resounding boom rang out as specks of yellow light surged out in a frenzy, transforming into countless grains of yellow sand. These grains of sand were very translucent and had wisps of yellow chi revolving around them. All of the grains of sand then converged to form a yellow cloud that was around 10 feet in size, looking completely unremarkable. Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward the cloud of yellow sand, and a surprised look immediately appeared on his face. This is baleful golden astral sand. On top of that, it's been carefully refined so that it's completely fused as one with the gourd. It's quite impressive that this sacred ancestor Qi Ling was able to track down such an exotic treasure, Han Li murmured to himself as he made a grabbing motion toward the cloud of sand. A burst of invisible suction force swept toward the yellow sand, and all of the grains of sand suddenly converged to form a translucent sand ball that was extremely heavy. As a result of its enormous weight, the sand ball only moved a short distance before stopping on the spot. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. He hadn't even unleashed a tenth of his power with that grab, but it was still more than powerful enough to crush the average body integration stage being, yet it wasn't even enough to move this ball of sand. This was further testament to the remarkable properties of baleful golden astral sand. Han Li had read about this rare material on some ancient tomes, and he knew that the most remarkable aspect about this material wasn't its incredible weight. Instead, it was a pair of fearsome abilities that the sand possessed. This is quite a pleasant surprise. Having said that, I'm the only one that can maximize the power of this sand. In the hands of anyone else, even that sacred ancestor Qi Ling, they most likely wouldn't even be able to unleash half of this material's power. Han Li murmured to himself with a smile on his face before drawing the gourd into his grasp, then chanted something as he swept a hand toward the cloud of sand up ahead. The ball of sand immediately disintegrated, fusing back into the surrounding sand cloud, following which the sand cloud transformed into a massive yellow python that pounced toward the gourd. The yellow gourd drew in the sand python amid a resounding boom, and the lid that had fallen off earlier somehow reappeared to seal the gourd's opening once again. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air, and the gourd was stowed away amid a flash of golden light. After that, he began to meditate in the secret chamber. Around 2 hours later, his eyes suddenly sprang open again, and he flicked his wrist to release a black bracelet. He then chanted something before pointing at the bracelet several times in succession, and a black object emerged from the bracelet amid a flash of golden light before hovering still in midair. This was a black insect cocoon that was riddled with thin purple patterns, and it was roughly the size of a watermelon. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he appraised the cocoon, then waved a hand through the air to draw it closer to him. He laid his hand onto the cocoon while inspecting it through narrowed eyes, seemingly using some type of secret technique to detect something. Moments later, an elated look appeared on his face. "It's very close to breaking out of the cocoon. Let me give it a hand." As soon as his voice trailed off, golden light erupted from his hand, and a burst of enormous true essential power surged into the cocoon through his hand. The purple patterns on the surface of the cocoon immediately began to glow, and the entire cocoon fluctuated erratically in size. Shortly thereafter, the sound of a heartbeat rang out within the cocoon. The sound gradually became louder and more pronounced, while Han Li continued to inject true essence into the cocoon. After 2 whole hours had passed, the black cocoon finally shattered, and a streak of golden light shot out from within, containing a miniature purplish golden figure that was around 3 inches tall. The miniature figure had a full set of limbs and a pair of eyes that were as pristine white as jade, but it had no mouth or nose. So this is the legendary gold-devouring beetle monarch, Han Li mused with a peculiar look on his face as he appraised the miniature figure. In the next instant, the purplish-golden figure suddenly turned its gaze toward Han Li, who was immediately struck by a cold chill on either side of his neck. Two streaks of golden light that were around a foot in length appeared without any warning before converging toward the center. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he instantly vanished on the spot in a wraith-like manner. The two streaks of golden light swept through the spot where he had been standing just a moment ago at an incredible speed, before abruptly vanishing in a flash. Spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, and Han Li re-emerged in another corner of the secret chamber. As soon as he appeared, he laid a hand onto his own neck with a stunned expression. A thin gash had appeared on each side of his neck, looking as if he had been attacked by a pair of sharp blades. Considering how powerful Han Li's body was, it was quite astonishing that he had been harmed so easily. Han Li's heart jolted as he cast a grim gaze toward the miniature purplish-golden figure. At the same time, he suddenly bit through the tip of his own tongue to expel a mouthful of blood essence, then quickly pointed a finger forward. The ball of blood essence quickly transformed into an unknown crimson rune, which swelled drastically in size at Han Li's behest before flashing erratically in brightness. At the same time, an identical rune of a much smaller size appeared on the miniature figure's glabella, and the figure shuddered as the rune vanished into its head in a flash. The miniature purplish-golden figure began to shudder even more violently as if it were under immense agony, but in the next instant, it suddenly stood up straight again before sweeping its fingers toward Han Li from afar. 10 dazzling streaks of golden light immediately reached Han Li before slashing toward him in a flash, striking him with a bone-chilling sensation, and even his protective spiritual light seemed to be unable to withstand the attacks. Even at his current cultivation base, Han Li couldn't help but shudder in response to this chilling sensation, and his limbs suddenly became extremely sluggish. Right as the streaks of golden light were about to slice Han Li's body into pieces, a cold harumph suddenly rang out. As soon as the miniature purplish-golden figure heard this sound, it felt as if it had received a hammer blow to the head, and it stumbled as it almost plummeted out of midair. As a result, the 10 streaks of golden light become completely erratic and directionless. Han Li took advantage of this opportunity to transform into a bolt of lightning to evade the attacks, then appeared elsewhere in an unhurried manner. Almost at the exact same moment, the massive crimson rune also shot forth toward Han Li as a ball of crimson light. Countless spiritual sense threads suddenly erupted out of Han Li's glabella, all of which vanished into the crimson rune in a flash, and the rune was abruptly brought to a screeching halt. Right at this moment, the miniature purplish-golden figure suddenly let loose a sharp cry, then fell onto the ground in an unconscious state. Chapter 2264, Demonic Cultivator Xianxia. Spiritual light flashed from Han Li's glabella, and his law-destruction eye vanished before he cast his gaze down toward the miniature figure and heaved a faint sigh. I knew that the restrictions I planted in the past wouldn't work once this thing evolved to become a beetle monarch. Fortunately, I had the foresight to tamper with the 3 foe beetle monarchs before they devoured one another. If I hadn't done that, it would be very difficult to control this beetle monarch. However, as a safety precaution, it looks like I'll have to refine it again using a secret technique. As soon as his voice trailed off, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release over 100 flags, which instantly formed a formation that was several tens of feet in size in the secret chamber. At the center of the formation was none other than the unconscious published golden figure. Han Li began to chant an incantation as he flicked incantation seals through the air, all of which vanished into the formation in a flash. Countless thin 5-colored threads emerged around the formation, then quickly converged toward the center to bind the miniature figure tightly. Han Li then opened his mouth to expel several more balls of blood essence that transformed into crimson runes, which shot forth toward the purplish-golden figure. At the same time, loud buzzing rang out within the entire formation, and waves of light surged toward the center of the formation. After a long while, the door of the secret chamber was opened, and Han Li emerged from within with a smile on his face. It was clear that his refinement of the gold-devouring beetle monarch had been very successful. A month later, Qi Lingzi and Bai Guo bade farewell to Han Li, embarking on their journey to the primordial world. After roughly another half a month, Han Li, Silvermoon, and Zhu Guor also departed from the Holy Island, traveling toward a certain region of the demon race on the Ink Spirit Holy Ark. Close to a month passed by in a flash, and the Ink Spirit Holy Ark encountered any demonic beings, but all of them immediately gave the Ark a wide berth upon seeing its mountainous stature and the vast array of powerful devil crystal puppets standing on the Ark's deck. However, not long after that, Han Li's Ark still alerted a demonic cultivating residing deep in the sea as if it was flying over that stretch of the ocean. This demonic cultivator was at the early body integration stage, and it had arrived here over 10,000 years ago before forcibly evicting several powerful demonic tribes in the area. Since then, it had regarded this area of the sea, which was quite abundant in resources, as its own territory. Not only was this demonic cultivator extremely powerful, it also had a very foul temper and several powerful treasures, so even other body integration stage demonic cultivators generally refrained from encroaching upon its territory. Thus, all demonic beings that traveled through the area had to inform this demonic cultivator in advance. On this day, the demonic cultivator was in the process of refining a cauldron of extremely important pills in a secret chamber of its underwater cave abode when a siren suddenly rang out outside the secret chamber. The demonic cultivator was startled by this, and azure demonic flames that he was fanning abruptly reared up. The pristine white cauldron that the pills were being refined in flashed erratically, and a charred smell immediately wafted through the air. The body integration stage demonic cultivator roared with fury upon seeing this, and it didn't even bother to check the alarm formation outside the secret chamber before flying out of its cave abode as a streak of white light. The ingredients required to refine the pills were extremely precious, and it had taken the demonic cultivator a lot of effort to gather enough for one bout of pill refinement. Now that the pills had been ruined, it immediately flew into a blind rage and rushed out to confront the culprit. Even though it didn't know who it was that had activated the alarm restriction, it had already made up its mind. If the culprit were an important figure, then it would let things slide with some compensation. However, if that weren't the case, then it would tear the culprit to shreds to assuage its fury. This demonic cultivator was able to travel extremely quickly through the water using a water movement technique, and as soon as it sprang out of the surface of the sea, it bellowed, "Who dares to encroach upon my territory? Surrender yourselves now and perhaps I'll." The demonic cultivator's voice abruptly cut off as a stunned look appeared on its face as it caught sight of the culprit. A mountainous black ark was currently traveling toward it at an altitude of several thousand feet, and standing atop the ark was a massive puppet army that sent chills running down the demonic cultivator's spine. There were several puppets that were giving off auras superior even to its own, and it immediately swallowed the rest of its words. The demonic cultivator immediately put on a fawning smile and said, "Ah, there's been a misunderstanding. I mistook you for someone else. I'll be on my way now so I don't delay you any longer." Immediately thereafter, it began to descend toward the sea down below. "Hold on, your patriarch Xianxia, right? We just so happen to be looking for a powerful being familiar with this area. You can stay for now." Silvermoon's voice rang out from the ark. As soon as her voice trailed off, 4 body integration stage puppets rose up from the ark before flying directly toward the demonic cultivator. Patriarch Xianxia's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he immediately plummeted out of the sky as a streak of white light while releasing several protective treasures at once. However, right at this moment, the 4 devil crystal puppet thrust their 8 palms down toward Patriarch Xianxia in unison, unleashing a burst of tremendous force that instantly shattered his protective treasures into specks of spiritual light. Patriarch Xianxia himself was also completely immobilized as the air tightened around him. His face turned deathly pale, and he could only look on helplessly as the 4 puppets flew toward him. One of them puppets picked him up with a single hand, then flew back toward the giant black ark with its puppet companions. Moments later, Patriarch Xianxia was presented before Han Li, Zhu Guor, and Silvermoon in the hall on the highest level of the Ink Spirit Holy Ark. The puppet tossed Patriarch Xianxia onto the ground, then retreated expressionlessly out of the hall. Even though Patriarch Xianxia was no longer being bound, the puppets had somehow managed to completely seal away his magic power, making it impossible for him to access it. Furthermore, it could sense that Silvermoon's aura was more powerful than his own, while Han Li's aura was completely unfathomable to him, and he didn't dare to resist any further as he extended a respectful salute toward Han Li with a wry smile. She pays his respects to his seniors. What can I do for you? Han Li appraised Patriarch She with a hint of a smile on his face, but didn't immediately reply to his question. Instead, it was Silvermoon who asked, "You're acting very tame and civilized now. Why was it that you were trying to escape just a moment ago?" That was only an instinctive reaction for self-preservation. After all, it's only natural that I would try to avoid beings as powerful as yourselves. Patriarch she replied in an awkward manner while stealing occasional wary glances at Han Li. HMPH, judging from how aggressive you were, I don't think self-preservation was on your mind. Could it be that you were trying to target us? Silvermoon harumphed as a cold look appeared on her face. Most definitely not. I was merely too brash and mistook you for some juniors that were encroaching upon my territory. Please forgive me for my arrogant display. Patriarch she hurriedly explained as cold sweat began to pour down his back. Silvermoon chuckled coldly in response before falling silent. At this moment Han Li said in an indifferent voice, "I don't care what your intentions were. You dared to provoke me, so you have to do something for me before I'll let you leave. Otherwise, you'll be facing some stern punishment." Patriarch she was lamenting his own ill fortune internally, but he could only force a smile onto his face as he replied, "I'll be sure to serve you to the best of my abilities, Senior. What is it that you would like me to do?" "Don't worry, it's a very simple task. All I want is for you to find a certain place for me. I heard that there's a damaged ancient altar here that travels through the area on its own. Is this true?" Han Li asked with a faint smile. Patriarch she's heart eased slightly upon hearing this, and he hurriedly replied, "Ah, so you're searching for that altar. I have seen it on multiple occasions in the past, but it'll require some luck to track it down. All I can do is take you to the places that the altar has frequently been sighted at." "All right, then lead the way," Han Li instructed, and Zhu Gyuor's eyes immediately lit up with excitement upon hearing this. Chapter 2265, Ancient Altar. Thus, the giant black ark paused in midair for a while longer before flying toward another direction, quickly vanishing into the distance. 2 months later, the mountainous ink spirit holy ark appeared in the sky above a massive lush forest. Han Li, Silvermoon, and Zhu Gyuor were all standing at the front of the ark, while Patriarch she was standing slightly behind them with a respectful expression. At this point, he had already been made aware that Han Li was the new Grand Ascension cultivator that had arisen from the human race, and he immediately abandoned all of the sneaky plots he was contemplating upon learning this. During this period of time, he had guided Han Li's trio through this region in a very obedient manner, and they had visited several places that the ancient altar regularly appeared at. Unfortunately, they still hadn't tracked down the altar yet. "This is the next place you were talking about?" Han Li asked. "Yes, Senior. This forest is very renowned among our demon race as a lethal region for all those below the deity transformation stage. Beings of the spatial tempering stage and above can ensure self-preservation in the forest, but anyone with a lower cultivation base, then that will be very prone to losing their lives here. Not only is this forest filled with vicious natural traps, the demonic beasts here are extremely powerful, and there are also several species of poisonous insects that are very difficult to deal with. Of course, none of that applies to a powerful being of your caliber, Senior," Patriarch she explained in a respectful voice. And Li nodded before asking in an expressionless manner, "Has the altar really appeared here before?" "I've heard from several fellow Taoists that they've seen the altar from afar on a few occasions at the center of the swamp down below. However, the altar is already damaged, so it doesn't have much use aside from some of the ancient runes on its surface that can be referenced by formation masters," Patriarch she replied. "In that case, let's go down there. I have a feeling that there's a 70% to 80% chance that the altar is situated here," Han Li said with a faint smile. Silvermoon and Zhu Gyuor were both elated to hear this. Thus, they descended from the giant ark toward the vast swamp in the forest down below. There was a layer of poisonous green mist above the swamp, and no cultivator below the spatial tempering stage would be able to stay in there for very long unless they possessed special protective treasures. Furthermore, there were tiny wasp-like poisonous insects within the mist that were extremely difficult to expel once they entered one's body. As such, this was indeed an extremely perilous place for the average demonic cultivator, but it was naturally nothing in the eyes of Han Li. Several balls of silver flames erupted out of his body, and bursts of heat waves instantly swept forth in all directions, eradicating all of the poisonous mist within an area of around an acre. All of the poisonous insects lurking within the mist were also instantly incinerated into nothingness. Occasionally, the group was attacked by a few reckless demon beasts, but those were all taken care of by Silvermoon with ease. A short while later, the group arrived at a nondescript corner of the swamp, and Han Li's eyes abruptly lit up. From several kilometers away, he could see an ancient altar that was around 1,000 feet tall hovering in midair. "There it is. Xianxia, you can stay here while we go on ahead," Han Li instructed. Patriarch Xianxia naturally had no objections and hurriedly agreed with a respectful bow. Thus Han Li's trio headed toward the tall altar, and a short while later they arrived at their destination. Han Li paused on the spot as he carefully examined the altar to find that it was rectangular in shape and was comprised of 3 levels. Its surface was riddled with unidentifiable ancient characters, but most of it was covered under a layer of green moss. The 4 corners of the altar were all damaged to a certain extent, indicating that it was a very old structure. "This really is an ancient compass altar. According to Bao Hua, all we have to do is use a secret technique at a set time to activate the coordinates recorded on the altar, and we'll be able to find the entrance to the small spirit sky. You were born in the small spirit sky, so your soul naturally contains a hint of that realm's aura. As such, the coordinates can be calculated more accurately if I can borrow a wisp of your spiritual sense," Han Li said. "No problem, Senior," Zhugyur hurriedly replied, and judging from her joyful expression, it was clear that she was also very much looking forward to being able to return to the small spirit sky. Silvermoon was also very happy for Zhugyur. Han Li had already revealed to her that there was a good chance that Nangong Wan was in the small spirit sky, but with Silvermoon's current mental state, she naturally wouldn't become jealous like a normal woman. Instead, she was happy to go with Han Li to search for Nangong Wan in the small spirit sky. Han Li was confident that Bao Hua wouldn't lie to him about something like this, but it was his first time calculating the coordinates of an entrance to another realm using an ancient altar. As such, he didn't know if any mishaps could occur, or how much deviation he should account for in the results. Thus, even though he appeared quite calm, he was not as confident as he looked. If it weren't for the fact that Bao Hua had told him that this type of altar could only be activated at a set time, he wouldn't have waited so long to do this. A series of thoughts were racing through Han Li's mind as he appraised the altar before him, and he suddenly swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light that swept up both himself and Zhugyur before the two of them vanished in unison. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted on the highest level of the altar, and the two of them re-emerged there. Silvermoon remained at the foot of the altar, looking up at Han Li with a hint of concern in her eyes. Han Li swept his gaze through the surrounding area to find that the altar was completely empty. However, as he cast his gaze onto the ground below, he immediately discovered that there was a circular compass-like formation on the edge of the altar. The entire formation was over 100 feet in size and covered virtually the entire top level of the altar. However, some of the runes on the formation were displaying signs of wear and had become very unclear. Han Li had already been informed that as long as the majority of the formation remained intact, small missing sections wouldn't affect the outcome of the calculations, so he wasn't all that concerned about this. Thus, he took a deep breath before making a hand seal, then cast an incantation seal into the formation. The formation flashed erratically several times as it was activated, and balls of light of different colors immediately began to appear in the air above the altar before injecting themselves into the altar. Han Li continued to flick his fingers through the air, releasing more and more incantation seals, and soon, slight tremors were running through the entire formation. At the same time, bands of gentle light had begun to take shape nearby before revolving around the altar. Right at this moment, Han Li let loose a low cry, then suddenly thrust a palm toward the ground down below. An azure pillar of light erupted out of the center of his palm, then injected itself into the altar through the compass formation. With this influx of pure magic power, the commotion ringing out from the altar intensified, and after a long while, Han Li had already injected close to a quarter of all of his magic power into the altar, but the suction force being released by the compass formation still showed no signs of relenting. It was no wonder that so many people were aware of this ancient altar's existence, but no one had taken an interest in it, One had to at least be a grand ascension stage, being just to be able to supply the altar with enough magic power for its activation. Of course, some body integration stage beings could also activate the altar to a certain extent with the assistance of top-grade spirit stones, but it was difficult to say just how much of the altar's functions they would be able to activate. Furthermore, none of the altar's functions could benefit one in their cultivation, so even grand ascension stage beings weren't interested in trying to activate it. Just as these thoughts were running through Han Li's mind, the suction force being released by the compass formation down below suddenly ceased. Countless runes of different colors then erupted out of the formation in a frenzy, gradually forming a massive round disc above the altar. The same compass design as the one on the formation was present in the disc, but some parts were extremely bright, while other parts were very dim. An elated look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. He stood up as he removed his hand from the formation, then swept a sleeve through the air to release an antiquated azure mirror. He then pointed a finger toward the disc up above several times in succession, and several translucent threads erupted out of his fingertip before vanishing into several parts of the disc in a flash. The runes on the disc that had been slightly dim immediately lit up and began to slowly revolve on their own. "Now, Gyur," Han Li instructed as his eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, Senior." Zhu Gyur immediately tapped a finger onto her own forehead, releasing a wisp of her spiritual sense, which vanished into the center of the giant disc in a flash. All of a sudden, the runes that were revolving slowly shuddered before accelerating drastically in their rotation. Chapter 2266, Trip to the Spirit Race. As the runes revolved, the entire disc also began to rotate, and countless runes emerged or vanished within the disc, presenting a very chaotic sight to behold. At the same time, the antiquated azure mirror also began to emit a faint buzzing sound, and azure light surged over its surface. There seemed to be something indistinct residing within the mirror, but it was impossible to make out exactly what it was. Han Li was staring intently at the changes unfolding in the disc with an unblinking gaze, seemingly calculating something in silence. After a long while, the giant disc had already revolved countless cycles, and Han Li suddenly yelled, "I've found it." He then pointed a finger up at the disc, and a burst of invisible energy fluctuations erupted forth to encompass the entire area within a radius of around half a kilometer. A dull thump rang out as the giant disc shuddered, and most of the runes on it disappeared, while only around a dozen runes remained, forming a strange diagram, at the center of which was a ball of gentle white light. Han Li carefully examined the diagram, then cast his gaze toward the azure mirror up ahead. The blurry image on the mirror gradually became clearer and clearer, and all of a sudden, a massive map appeared on its surface. There was a scintillating speck of light on one part of the map, and it seemed to be resonating with the diagram on the giant disc. Han Li stared at the map for a short while before his brows furrowed slightly. Zhu Gyur had been waiting this entire time, and she couldn't help but ask, "Senior Han, have you found the entrance to the small spirit sky?" "Not really. I can only say that I've narrowed its location down slightly," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "What do you mean by that, Senior Han?" Zhu Gyur was rather perplexed. "The entrance to the small spirit sky isn't situated on our Tian Yuan continent. Instead, it's on one of the other two continents," Han Li replied. "It's on another continent. Is it the Thunder continent or the Blood Sky continent?" Zhu Gyur asked. "I'm not sure. The sensory range of this altar is limited only to the Tian Yuan continent, so if we want to find the location of the entrance to the small spirit sky, we'll have to find the same altars on the other continents," Han Li replied. Zhu Gyur's face immediately fell upon hearing this, "So that means we'll have to go to the other continents." "It looks like we'll have to. Thankfully, once the entrance to the small spirit sky is finalized, it won't change location for at least the next few centuries, so we have plenty of time to do this. It's just that our entry to the small spirit sky will have to be delayed," Han Li sighed with a resigned expression. Fortunately, with his current level of power, he was virtually a dominant force across the entire spirit realm, so exploring the other continents wouldn't be a perilous task for him. Furthermore, this was also an opportunity for him to complete the task that he had agreed to complete for Fairy Ice Soul's clone. With that in mind, he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light that stowed the azure mirror away, then cast a string of incantation seals toward the formation on the altar. Another burst of violent tremors ran through the altar, and all of the lights on it were instantly snuffed out, while the compass formation also reverted back to its original form. As a result, the giant round disk up above also slowly disintegrated into nothingness. Another burst of golden light erupted from Han Li's body, and both he and Zhu Guo vanished on the spot. In the next instant, the two of them appeared beside Silvermoon amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. "How did it go, Brother Han?" Silvermoon asked. "It didn't go very well, but it didn't go too badly either," Han Li replied with a wry smile, then revealed the outcome to Silvermoon. After hearing his recount, Silvermoon chuckled. "It's just like you said. It's not great, but it's not bad either. Even though we haven't found the entrance to the small spirit sky, this at least confirms to us that the method provided by Bao Hua is feasible. Now, all we have to do is explore the other continents and find ancient compass altars there as well. It looks like I'll have to leave the Tian Yuan continent for some time. I just so happen to have some things I need to do on the other continents anyway, so I'll be able to kill multiple birds with one stone. However, before that, I have to make a trip to the spirit race and resolve the issue of your grandfather's tribulation transcendence first," Han Li replied. "We'll do as you say, Brother Han. That spirit monarch is an extremely mysterious figure. Make sure to take care when facing him," Silvermoon cautioned. "I'll be sure to do so. Regardless of whether this spirit monarch really has lived for 1,000,000 years, his origins are very suspicious, so I'm very interested in him," Han Li said with a smile. With Silvermoon's exceptional intelligence, she was immediately able to infer what Han Li was implying. "Are you suspecting that he's not a being from our spirit realm?" "I checked through some tomes, and according to the information I found, the spirit race has existed for the shortest time among all of the races in this area. Apparently, it's only been around for about 1,000,000 years, and most of the spirit beings seem to have suddenly emerged in a very short time, but their population has been increasing extremely slowly since then," Han Li analyzed in a calm manner. Silvermoon's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and she didn't ask any further questions, but she had already formed her own conclusions on the matter. "It's time for us to go back now. That Patriarch Hua, she isn't all that powerful, but he possesses some decent water attribute abilities, so he may be useful on our trips to the other continents. Let's take him back to the Holy Island with us," Han Li said. "That shouldn't be an issue. I'm sure fellow Taoist Hua she wouldn't refuse the chance to stay with a Grand Ascension stay, being and occasionally receive some guidance from you," Silvermoon chuckled. Han Li merely smiled in response, then released a burst of golden light that swept up all three of them before flying away into the distance. Over half a year later, a clear cry suddenly erupted into the heavens from a restricted area on the Holy Island, causing all of the spirit clouds above the Holy Island to tremor violently. All of the high-grade beings on the Holy Island all sensed this commotion, and elated looks appeared on all of their faces. Han Li was in the process of refining a certain type of pill in his cave abode, and he smiled as he cast an incantation into his cauldron, then murmured to himself, "Fellow Taoist Mo has finally recovered, so it looks like we'll be able to set off to the spirit race soon. I hope I'll reap some rewards from this trip." After that, Han Li continued to cast incantation seals toward his cauldron. A month later, the enormous ink spirit Holy Ark appeared above the Holy Island again, then immediately sped away into the distance. Han Li, Silvermoon, and Zhu Guo were all situated on the Ark, and they were accompanied by Mo Jianli and Patriarch Hua Shi. Just as Silvermoon had anticipated, Patriarch Hua, she was ecstatic that Han Li was willing to keep him around for a while, and he immediately rushed back to his cave, abode to pack up his things before traveling to the Holy Island with Han Li. To his credit, Han Li had treated Patriarch Hua Shi very well, bestowing upon him some pills and guidance in his cultivation. As a result, Patriarch Hua Shi had benefited significantly and made a breakthrough to the mid-body integration stage during this short span of less than a year. As such, Patriarch Hua Shi was filled with gratitude and veneration toward Han Li, and he had become virtually half a disciple to Han Li. After departing from the Holy Island, the giant ark immediately sped toward a predetermined direction, and at its extraordinary speed, it reached Deep Heaven City in the span of just over 2 months. Han Li and Mo Jianli only stayed in the city for 2 or 3 days to meet some of the elders, then continued onward into the primordial world. With 2 Grand Ascension stage beings at the helm, a trip through the perilous primordial world was like a stroll in the park. They encountered some ancient beasts along the way, but the puppet army on the Ark was more than enough to handle them. The only time they encountered any real trouble was when they had flown into a gale storm, as they were traveling over a massive canyon. Pillars of gale force winds that were over 100,000 feet tall surged toward the giant ark from all sides, making it look extremely tiny and insignificant. The puppet army was only able to protect the ark to a certain extent, but was unable to truly alleviate the threat. Only then did Han Li and Mo Jianli appear on either side of the giant ark. The latter made a grabbing motion to conjure up two balls of lightning, which transformed into a pair of lightning swords that swept viciously through the air, while the former transformed into a giant golden ape that was over 1,000 feet tall, then thrust his fists violently toward the pillars of wind in the distance.